The protagonist stares mysteriously and focused forward, covering part of his face with his hand. Against a starry sky and full moon stands a high-rise building with a neon sign lit up in hieroglyphics. A middle-aged man in the company of girls compliments the protagonist, Mr. Chung. A man and the protagonist clink wine glasses that are half filled. A bright blush could be seen on the man's face, his eyes widened and his mouth ajar with obvious surprise. Chen looks at the man with absolute calmness, dismissing the compliment the man gave him earlier. The man hesitated with embarrassment and offered to drink more alcohol, claiming that Chen could rely on him and not worry about anything. Chen looks disapprovingly at his companion, who continues to drink in an attempt to distract himself. The protagonist stares intently at his reflection in the wine glass and thinks about his past and his name. His reflection in the glass becomes indistinct, and he confidently states that he is no longer Chen Hansheng, and his only joy is wine. He continues to sit on the couch in the company of a man and several ladies, believing them to be hypocrites for wearing masks. Chen is introduced to Miss Zhang, who immediately notes that his spouse is immensely lucky. The man points out that Chen is single and is currently the enviable groom, causing Miss Zhang to be embarrassed. Sitting down on the couch with the other characters, Miss Zhang notes Chen's sophistication and high standards. She holds up a business card in her hand, wondering about the potential of being seen by the protagonist. Miss Zhang leans closer to him and proceeds to shower him with compliments, talking about the importance of balancing family and career. Chen listens to her silently, casting an interested glance at her after she leans against him. She gently holds out her business card to him and asks him to take it. The protagonist looks at her with a slight smile as she is happy that he took her business card for himself. There is a bottle of alcohol on the table, and several heroes offer a drink to Chen and his skills. Several cars are seen in the background of the night city. The protagonist wants a ride, but he refuses, motivated by the fact that his house is close enough. The protagonist sighs heavily and walks to his car, holding his jacket in one hand and grabbing the door handle with the other. Suddenly, Chen is distracted from the car when he hears a rather loud meow. Under his car, near the wheels, is a small ginger kitten that keeps meowing. Chen picks it up, lamenting that the kitten is lucky that the protagonist spotted it and the kitten wasn't hurt. He releases the ginger kitten and it runs away cheerfully, looking back at the protagonist one last time. In the darkness, the glowing headlights that belong to Chen's car stand out brightly. The protagonist himself sits peacefully with his eyes closed in his car, relaxed in the front seat. Chen opens his eyes and transfers his gaze to the window of his car. The same ginger kitten is seen outside with two other adult cats, his parents. Chen averts his gaze, thinking about his own family, whom he hasn't visited in a while and wants to do so. He starts the car and puts his hand on the gearbox, preparing to drive home. Chen sits with his seatbelt fastened and his hand reaches for his shirt pocket. Among the vast array of business cards, he sees Miss Zhang's business card with a kiss mark on it. He looks long and thoughtfully at the large number of business cards in his hand. After a while, he throws away all the business cards that were previously in his hand in one motion. All the business cards fly off in a chaotic pattern, falling to the ground near Chen's car. Chen starts the car, which makes some of the cards fly even farther away, and some of them he just runs over. The protagonist's car moves farther and farther away to the song, and the business cards continue to lie on the ground. Night city lights illuminate the empty highway, many skyscrapers visible in the background. Chen keeps one hand on the steering wheel and props his chin up with the other, looking out the window and listening to the song. He then shifts his gaze back to the road with a bored expression on his face, his hand firmly gripping the steering wheel. He confidently increases his speed, following the words of the song about 500 miles. Suddenly, he is met by a huge truck that blinds him, illuminating the entire street with its headlights. The main character's eyes widen with shock. You can see the horror and fear in them. He didn't expect this. A girl in a long dress and carrying a bicycle admonishes him that smoking is not allowed here. Chen cackles, holding one hand to his head, which abruptly begins to ache. He opens one eye and tries to figure out exactly what happened to him and where he is. A girl in a long dress stands in front of him with a surprised expression on her face when he doesn't recognize her. The people in the background are surprised at his nonchalance. The guy sitting on the bench coughs demonstratively, much to the bewilderment of Chen sitting next to him. His eyes widen with total incomprehension. He thinks he's dreaming. The protagonist continues to be puzzled by what is happening, and suddenly notices something. At his companion's incomprehensible stare, he notices his reflection in the poster next to the bench where they are sitting. His eyes grow even larger, and a drop of sweat stands out on his face. He freezes in total shock as he realizes he has been reborn. The shock on the protagonist's face got bigger and bigger. He absolutely doesn't understand what's going on. The girl with dark hair awkwardly averted her gaze downward, maintaining her silence as she waited for any reaction from Chen. The protagonist is grabbed with his hand over his face, saying that his behavior is out of the ordinary and should never be done that way. An unfamiliar tall guy clenches his hand into a fist and talks about hoping that the protagonist will have a happy future and recover from his broken heart. Han Sheng looks at him with a long, piercing, and displeased look, saying nothing. He is annoyed by the stranger's stubbornness and his words. His friend sits with him on a bench in confusion, not understanding what happened to the protagonist and why he is like this, while Han Sheng himself holds a cigarette in his hands, looking at the tall guy. The expression on the protagonist's face becomes immensely grim, and he earnestly and coldly asks the tall, unfamiliar guy who he is. You can see the horror on the tall guy's face from this reaction, and he decides that he needs to leave because the hero doesn't deserve this kind of attention, and the girl just stares silently at Han Sheng in utter shock. The girl finally decides to speak up, noting that if the protagonist chooses to ignore her, that's his business. But she's made it clear that she doesn't want a relationship now, and her opinion won't change anything. The hero looks at her worriedly when she mentions that she will tell his mother about his smoking. He can't remember who she is, but it scares him that his mom might find out about his bad habit. Han Sheng is extremely annoyed and doesn't understand how the girl knows his mother. His friend is still looking at him with incomprehension as well, and the tall guy is getting angrier and angrier by the minute. He looks forward questioningly as he is handed a bottle of water and notified that they will come for a notice of enrollment later. Han Sheng refuses the offer, and the tall guy complains that the protagonist is building a tough guy on nothing. The girl is silent and does not understand the hero's behavior. The girl gradually reaches her hand, in which she holds a bottle of water toward the bench while Han Sheng watches her in surprise but with some interest. The girl leaves the bottle on the bench and with a displeased look and obvious resentment on her face, turns around and leaves, and the hero does not comment on it in any way. The main character watches a girl and a tall guy ride off on bikes and wonders if he actually confessed his feelings to her. His friend puts his arm around his shoulder and asks him to stop ignoring him, while the hero realizes it's a girl he had a crush on as a high school student. Han Sheng shifts his questioning gaze to the guy beside him, asking him directly who he is. His best friend Wang Zibo grabs him by his shirt, screaming that he is his best friend and has always smoked with him. Han Sheng says that Zibo has gone to Iraq, which makes his friend even angrier. They walk down a typical Chinese street with lots of stores and 3-story houses. His friend asks him not to drink so much and to pick up the notice, and Han Sheng realizes that now, on a white sign near the door, written something in hieroglyphics, the protagonist is congratulated on his successful graduation. His teacher, with a slight smile and covered eyes, hands him his graduation certificate. His friend is surprised that Han Sheng passed the first-level exam, and the hero mentions that he also passed the second-level exam without any problems. He looks at his smiling teacher, Lao Shu, who will die of cancer, and Han Sheng won't be able to attend his funeral because he will be overseas in the future. Wang Zibo thanks the teacher for his notice, and the protagonist becomes convinced that he has indeed traveled back in time. And suddenly he notices something. A red pack of cigarettes with gold hieroglyphics on it lies on the table next to a pen and a stack of papers, standing out as a bright spot. Han Sheng takes the cigarettes for himself under the surprised gaze of his teacher and his friend, and asks Lao Shu to smoke less. He looks at the teacher, holding a pack of cigarettes in his hand, and reminds him that teaching high school is already a difficult process, and smoking will hurt the teacher even more. The teacher looks at Han Sheng with obvious incomprehension, more like a kind of shock, clearly not expecting him to say such words. But then Lao Shu laughs a little and tells the protagonist that he will smoke less in the future. Han Sheng says he'll take the cigarettes for educational purposes, which makes his friend and teacher even more surprised. The tall guy resents how such a protagonist could have been accepted into the university, but the girl with the curry tries to defend him by saying that their conflict is a misunderstanding, but the guy continues to resent him over cigarettes. Xiao Rongyu stands next to the girl with the rack, who continues to defend Han Sheng and tries to explain the reason for smoking. The guy interrupts her and calls the protagonist a criminal and a brawler, at which point Han Sheng and his friend appear behind his back, surprised by the presence of his classmates. He walks directly to Xiao, leaning slightly towards her, which causes a shock to the guy and girl standing next to him. Han Sheng asks where she is studying now. Blushing slightly, she replies that she studies at Dunhai University, and Han Sheng informs her that she studies at the neighboring University of Finance and Economics. The guy next to her tries to humiliate him, but nothing comes out. Han Sheng asks what time it is, whereupon Xiao Rongyu looks at his watch and informs him that it's 5 o'clock. The protagonist takes her hand and asks her about where she bought the watch, and hints that 05020 means I love you. The tall guy indignantly pushes him away from Xiao, accusing him of trying to reconfess his feelings for the girl, but Han Sheng doesn't react. He decides to leave while the tall guy irritably yells after him and Xiao awkwardly clutches his notice. A loudspeaker is bolted to a tall pole, from which music-like sounds are emitted. The rays of the setting sun shine through the windows, illuminating the empty classroom where the Chinese flag on the wall stands out brightly. Han Sheng relaxedly walks out of the school with the notice in his hands, looking at the uniformed students walking beside him. He shifts his gaze to the side and sees a crowd of kids playing basketball and trying to put the ball in the hoop. The school children walking ahead are chatting and laughing among themselves, discussing something interesting. The protagonist looks up at the sun, which brightly illuminates his tired but relaxed face. He closes his eyes, enjoying the sunshine, thinking about school being a place of peace. Against a sunset sky with occasional flecks of clouds, Han Sheng regrets that school has come to an end. The last rays of the bright sun that illuminate the street are slowly fading into the sunset, giving way to night. Han Sheng walks beside his best friend and thinks about the fact that for the first time in years, he has a chance to go home. Someone behind their backs calls out their name, causing Han Sheng and Zibo to have to turn around and see who it is. He sees Xiao and the girl and guy he ran into earlier at school. He's not happy to see them again. Xiao bikes up to him and tells him that he and his friend didn't write anything in her classmate notebook. The protagonist stares at her silently, slightly lowering her curious gaze downward, studying Xiao. Xiao also stares at him intently, pulling out a classmate's notebook from her bicycle basket, which is in a bag. She holds the notebook in her hand and holds it out to Han Sheng, asking him to write something to her as a memento. The tall guy looks at the protagonist with even more annoyance and displeasure and waits for his actions. He demands that Han Sheng write something nice, rather than circling the slightly blushing Xiao with his gaze. Xiao warns Han Sheng to stop staring at her, but the protagonist excuses himself by looking solely at his notebook. He opens his classmate's notebook and starts looking at what has been written there before. The notebook is filled with wishes. His attention is drawn to a poem by William Yeats that Gao Jialiang wrote and passed off as his own. Xiao points with her pen to a blank sheet in the notebook and demands that Han Sheng write something rather than read the entire notebook. After that, Han Sheng decides to hand the notebook to his best friend to write first, but his friend hasn't figured out what to write yet, and so is confused. Blushing, his friend writes Xiao a wish that she will become more and more beautiful with age. The notebook returns to the hero's hands and Xiao writes him at least something, but other than a wish to stay young, he can't think of anything. After thinking for a bit, the protagonist begins to leisurely write down his wishes in Xiao's notebook. He writes her a little poem with a play on words. Xiao reads it, but the tall guy mocks it and the girl with the rack finds the verse unique. Xiao looks carefully and thoughtfully at the notebook and notes that the verse is written quite well. She notifies the hero that she won't tell his mother that he was smoking, and the tall guy drives her home, reasoning that it will soon be dark. They look after the departing company, and his friend resents Han Sheng for making him sign the notebook first. The protagonist prods him with words of sympathy for Xiao, which his friend instantly denies. They walk together and the protagonist suggests going to McDonald's tomorrow, much to the surprise of his best friend. Han Sheng explains his choice of day by the fact that he has a family dinner tonight. Wang Zibo looks at the protagonist and asks about whether Han Sheng can skip this dinner. Han Sheng turns down an alley and leaves his friend alone, saying that he doesn't understand anything. His friend looks at him with incomprehension and sees him off without saying a word. The protagonist walks down a narrow alley, which is lit by a lantern and signs of various establishments. In the light of the lantern, Han Sheng recalls various moments from his childhood, such as where he and his mom lit Bengal lights. He also recalls coming home as a kid in a dirty school uniform and his mom scolding him for it. Or like when he was a teenager, his mom would ask him to take food with him and he would refuse to do this kind act. Han Sheng recalls sitting up late at night with a huge mountain of textbooks doing homework. The main character remembers the phone that was always lying next to him when he was doing his homework. He recalls a middle-aged man from the club complimenting him in the future. The main character thinks about his childhood, his adolescence, and his future, which he already knows. He stops near a red door that is closed behind a metal fence. He looks at this door and stands motionless, the sides showing red posters with something written in black hieroglyphics. A slight smile plays on his lips and a lone light bulb illuminates his face as he stands in the entryway. He brings his hand to the door, hesitating, contemplating whether or not to knock. Han Sheng stares intently at the door, weighing the pros and cons before knocking. At one point, he is overwhelmed with determination and bangs loudly on the door, demanding that his mom open it. His mom swings the door open sharply, unhappy that he's yelling so loudly and always forgetting his keys. Han Sheng smiles mischievously and says that he wanted to call his mother, and she notes that he's quite the talker. His mom closes the door and Han Sheng complains that it's hot in the house and they need to turn on the air conditioner. In parallel, he wonders where his dad is. He picks up the remote control of the air conditioner, and his mom informs him that his dad is still at work, and Han Sheng is able to handle the air conditioner on his own. Mom holds out a plate with several slices of watermelon to the protagonist, causing Han Sheng to be surprised. Wincing, he starts actively eating and thanking his mom, and she tells him to eat quietly and not get distracted. While he eats while sitting on the couch, his mom asks him to go take a shower later and put his university admission papers on the table. Han Sheng happily eats the watermelon, smiling, and catches himself thinking that the watermelon still has the same familiar taste. In a high-rise building, a few apartments have lights on in the middle of a dark night. The main character's mom holds in her hand a notice of enrollment in the university. She smiles proudly and rejoices that now they have a student in their family. Han Sheng stands in the bathroom and hears the future life plans his mom has already made, thinking about his graduation from university and grandchildren. The main character smiles ironically as he looks in the mirror, knowing that his mom won't see grandchildren for the next 35 years. He thinks about the fact that he needs to send his father away somehow. Then he will have no problem with money for normal development. The protagonist is distracted from his thoughts by a noise coming from the living room of his apartment, and Sheng happily steps out of the shower, noticing that his father has already returned home. The protagonist's father stands in the living room and unbuttons his shirt, concurrently confirming his return. Despite his obvious fatigue, something important catches Han Sheng's father's attention. His father picks up the remote control for the air conditioner and adjusts the temperature to keep his family comfortable. Looking at the air conditioner, Han Sheng notes how caring his father is after all. The main character's angry mother bursts into the living room with her son's jacket and a pack of cigarettes, accusing the latter of smoking. Han Sheng tries to justify to his parents that the cigarettes were given to him by his teacher for passing his exams, but his mother doesn't believe him and accuses his father of neglecting his son. Father says it's too early for Han Sheng to smoke, and mother adds that father should also smoke less and it's time for them all to sit down to eat. A faint light is seen exclusively from one apartment, diluting the darkness of the moonlit night. The protagonist's mother and father are sitting on the bed, and she asks to give her son money to take with him to university, while the father says that the son should just be let go. The mother looks worriedly at her husband and laments that her son has listened to her less as he has gotten older, even though his parents have always encouraged his ideas. The father remarks that their son may not be the best student, but his intelligence will not let him go to waste and needs to be supported. Han Sheng's mother listens attentively to everything her husband says regarding their son's future. She averts her gaze and sighs, immersed in her own thoughts about her son. It's starting to dawn on an ordinary Chinese street. The street lights are still on, and in the background you can hear Han Sheng's mom realizing that he's grown up. On the bedside table in the protagonist's bedroom is an alarm clock that signals that it's time for him to get up. Han Sheng lies mindlessly in his bed, partially covered by the blanket and thinking about something of his own. He shifts his gaze to the alarm clock that stands peacefully on the bedside table. Then he looks around the room, especially the manga bookshelf, and realizes he's stuck in his past. A strong string of water runs from the bathroom faucet in the wash basin, his mother's voice noting that Han Sheng is up early today. The main character calmly brushes his teeth and looks at his tired mom, saying he's hungry. His mom yawns and says he can buy his own breakfast and she'll go to bed because sleep is the most important thing. Han Sheng doesn't say anything, but thinks about how this is clearly not how you should raise your child. The protagonist stands near a street food stand in a playground and asks the price of an egg tart. After the vendor replies, he is mentally surprised at such a low price and asks for 2 patties for him and wonders where the payment code is. The salesman looks at him in total bewilderment and doesn't understand what code we're talking about. The protagonist is electrocuted when he realizes that it's the year 2002 and you can't pay with phones. Han Sheng realizes that he doesn't have any money with him. His mother didn't leave him anything, and the vendor asks if he's going to buy pies. The protagonist refuses and quickly makes up an excuse that the pies are bad because his grandmother told him so. He walks home disappointed, mentally complaining about the extremely inconvenient payment system and life in the past. Han Sheng stops abruptly and is distracted from his thoughts, turning his attention to something in front of him. Xiao Rongyu runs in a tracksuit, clearly out of breath from a long jog. Han Sheng calls out to Xiao, who immediately turns her attention to the protagonist when he calls out to her. She looks at Han Sheng, who greets her in surprise, absolutely not expecting to see him now. Xiao looks at him and wonders what he's doing here so early, since it's only 6 hours and 30 minutes in the morning. A thought flashes through her mind, but she doesn't have time to follow through on the idea that came to her. Hanshi greets her, but she quickly interrupts him and says that she knows why he's here. Xiao rests her arms at her sides and repeats once again that she doesn't want a relationship right now. The protagonist freezes in prostration, not expecting such a conclusion from the girl. Xiao blushes and suggests that it was just to get her up this early and Han Sheng finds the idea absolutely ridiculous. Xiao looks at the protagonist with her arms crossed over her chest and asks him if he was trying to get her attention by ignoring her yesterday, to which Han Sheng remains silent. He stands awkwardly and listens to Xiao's tirade about how he's a nice guy, but she doesn't want a relationship and only by graduation will they be able to discuss it, and the protagonist remarks to himself that this is the reason they aren't dating. Still as disgruntled as ever, Xiao says she doesn't want to be distracted, and to herself she thinks about the promise she made to herself throughout high school that she wouldn't have a relationship, and the same goes for university. Xiao asks him not to comment on anything because everything is clear, and Han Sheng agrees with her and says she's smart. The protagonist invites her to breakfast where they can talk. Much to Xiao's surprise, she embarrassedly remarks that she should be the one to invite him because he helps her a lot with her studies. Han Sheng agrees with her and suggests they meet at a stall near the police station that has soy milk and refried beans, saying it will be delicious. A few police officers and bystanders stand outside a diner with a bright yellow sign. Xiao's familiar greets her, and she happily and politely greets him back while the protagonist enjoys his favorite food. Uncle Zhang admonishes him that Han Sheng eats too much and doesn't understand the harm of overeating, and Xiao looks at him questioningly. Eating another dumpling, the protagonist claims he'll be in perfect shape until he's 35, while Xiao skeptically asks how he knows that. Han Sheng explains to her that he met a fortune teller a few days ago, so he knows exactly what his future holds and continues to eat. He says he will be rich and successful, but unfortunately without a wife because his marriage line is missing, to which Xiao blushes. Xiao exhales indignantly and says that's nonsense because men's opinions and feelings change quickly. Han Sheng says a fortune teller taught him how to divine by hand, explaining that each palm pattern is unique and shows a person's fate, and he notes that the buns made by the owner or his wife will be different. He says that the buns the owner makes are smooth, and his wife makes them with creases. Xiao is skeptical of such a claim and confidently says nonsense. Xiao then transfers a puzzled and slightly awkward look to the owners of the diner to watch them work and make buns. She watches the owner and his wife mold the very buns Han Sheng is talking about, trying to catch the details of the process. The girl turns her attention to the board on which the buns are laying, and sees that they are indeed completely different textures and shapes. Xiao watches this with shock, and at the same time the protagonist notes to herself that she lacks basic knowledge about baking, because the shape of the bun depends on its filling, and that's the secret. He catches Xiao's attention and extends his hand to her, which causes the girl to turn away from the diner owner and his wife, no longer watching the cooking process. With a snide expression on his face, Han Sheng thinks that using hand divination can confuse a person who hasn't figured himself out and suggests Xiao to do the fortune-telling. Xiao immediately suspects that there's something fishy going on and asks what he's up to, but he says there's nothing to it, just divination. After thinking about it for a while, the girl decides to trust him in the matter of fortune-telling. Han Sheng looks at her hand and explains the meaning of the patterns. According to Confucianism, for example, if the lifeline is long, you will be healthy and happy. Xiao blushes slightly at such a statement, not expecting such serious words from the protagonist. He marks the wisdom line on her hand, saying that she likes to fantasize and also that she will be happy. The marriage line he calls confusing. She needs to stay away from guys running around her and she needs to be careful. He takes a dramatic pause and says that he seems to have figured out who her ideal husband is, to which she is surprised. He takes her hand and tells a blushing Xiao that her perfect husband is right in front of her. The indignant Xiao yanks her hand away, and the protagonist hurriedly thanks her for breakfast. The protagonist walks relaxedly towards the exit of the diner, preparing to go home, and Xiao asks her to wait. On his way out, the diner owner's wife looks at him with a piercing stare of obvious suspicion. He tells the owner's wife that a girl paid for him, and at that time a policeman walks into the diner. The policeman notices him and turns around, looking intently at the protagonist. The hero holds a toothpick in his mouth and looks questioningly at the policeman in response. Han Sheng comes out of the diner and the policeman seems familiar to him, possibly a friend of his parents. Behind his back, Xiao and the policeman are talking, and the diner owner's wife looks disapprovingly in the hero's direction. He turns around in utter incomprehension, trying to realize what exactly is going on. The diner owner's wife starts talking to the policeman and points her finger at Han Sheng. The policeman abruptly turns around and looks at the protagonist along with the diner owner's wife. The policeman's eyes narrow with anger and displeasure when he sees Han Sheng. Han Sheng felt as if he was electrocuted by the realization, and he fell into a stupor and shock. He says goodbye to Xiao, saying that he urgently needs to go home because he has things to do. The protagonist abruptly starts running, realizing that this policeman is Xiao's father. Early morning, a double-decker blue bus stands at the Gangcheng bus station stop and gradually fills with passengers. Han Sheng and his best friend discuss the difference between girls in university and high school, and the fact that unlike high school and university, studying is at the student's own will. The protagonist is unhappy that his friend is asking him too many questions, but then his friend mentions that he saw Xiao. As soon as he mentions it, Han Sheng averts his gaze to the window, and his friend notices that he has immediately become interested in the topic. From the window, he observes a picture of Xiao standing next to his father, near the open hood of the car. His friend says that Xiao's father's car broke down, and the protagonist thinks about the fact that he hasn't seen her since he ran into her father at the diner. Xiao notices that someone is watching her, and so she turns her head towards her watcher. She turns away unhappily when she sees Hanshin, and such a reaction makes the protagonist cringe. The bus driver asks if the captain is okay, and he says that the car broke down and he wanted to give his daughter a ride to the university. The bus driver offers to give Xiao a ride since he doesn't care on the way to her destination. A police captain's attention is drawn to a voice asking if his car has broken down. It turns out to be Xiao's former classmate, who offers her help to give her a ride to the university since she'll be safe that way. He talks about how there are a lot of people on the bus and it would be easier to get to the destination by car, and the main character observes this and thinks the captain will refuse. The captain is in a stupor from today's mishaps and doesn't trust the rich man Gao, believing he has bad intentions. The policeman decides to ask his daughter's opinion whether she wants to take the bus or Gao's car. The captain waits for his daughter's reply, as Gao glows with hope and happiness. Xiao chooses to ride the bus, and the protagonist has no words to comment on the situation. The protagonist offers his friend a seat up front, to which he refuses. He asks his best friend to move over so Xiao can sit next to him. When asked by a better friend why doesn't Han Sheng sit down, he talks about getting motion sickness at the front of the bus. Xiao stands in the aisle between the seats and the protagonist ignores her, not noticing her presence. The main character looks out the window while his best friend sits with his eyes closed, still disgruntled. In the end, the disgruntled friend does transfer, although he is very angry about it. The protagonist looks out the window and a policeman asks to keep an eye on his daughter, as their universities are close by. Han Sheng says that he will definitely take care of Xiao, thus shocking Gao, who is standing nearby. The bus rushes along the sunny highway at breakneck speed without making any stops. The protagonist's best friend is unhappy with his seat because there's a broken curtain, and it's still a 5-hour drive. Han Sheng asks the conductor to give his friend a visor, as he can't stand such a long ride in the sun. The main character yawns demonstratively and says that he's up early today, so he's going to sleep now. He closes his eyes, and Xiao thinks about the fact that he's trying to avoid talking to her this way. She looks away unhappily, and thinks about how much longer this pretense of Hanshin's will last. Without noticing it himself, the protagonist puts his head down on Xiao's shoulder and really falls asleep. Xiao's father's intuition tells him that something is wrong after his daughter gets on the bus. The bus also continues to drive quickly on the highway without slowing down. After a while, the bus pulls onto a bridge, and in the distance, a boat can be seen on the water. A passenger's shout about it being the Yangtze Bridge wakes up Han Sheng, and he, being sleepy, looks out the window. The protagonist is distracted from the view of the bridge and looks at Xiao out of the corner of his eye, with obvious interest. He looks at the girl carefully, and notes to himself that Yao is even more beautiful up close than usual. Han Sheng keeps a neutral expression on his face, and Xiao asks him if he was surprised by the sight of the bridge. The protagonist looks away as if to ignore her question. Then he turns abruptly to the girl, and leans in close enough to her that it makes her blush. Xiao abruptly pulls away from him. Her eyes widened and her face completely red. The main character looks at her with a slight smirk, asking her if she was surprised by that bridge. The girl is still in a shocked state, and looks at the main character with an obvious blush on her cheeks. She is very uncomfortable with what is happening on the bus. Han Sheng tells the girl that he has been to this city before, and has not only traveled across the bridge but also seen the local sights. So it's hard to surprise him with anything. The girl looks at him with a kind of incomprehension, but at the same time with interest. The protagonist looks out the window again, and Xiao thinks about whether or not he did it on purpose. After a while, the characters finally arrive at the Jianye bus station and prepare to get off the bus. There are several different buses at the bus station with people getting off. The protagonist's friend complains about the heavy suitcases, while the protagonist himself says he was warned not to take so many things with him. Yao herself stands awkwardly surrounded by 3 large suitcases. She is surprised at Hanshin's lack of belongings, but he says he has everything at the university, and his mom will send him the rest. The girl is surprised by the protagonist's ingenuity, realizing that it could have been done more simply, and Han Sheng calls her simple-minded. He gives her tips on how to get to her university and tells her the exact route. Xiao wonders how he'll get to the university, and he replies that he and his friend have already decided to take a walk in the park. The girl freezes in total shock when the protagonist informs her that they will see each other later. She shouts after the hero, calling him by name, which makes his friend's hero twitch in surprise. Xiao is in a state of rage and reminds Han Sheng that he promised to take care of her. She stares intently at the back of the two characters, waiting for action, while the people at the train station watch intently. The protagonist turns to her, visibly nervous, and looks at the angry Xiao. He asks her not to yell. He slowly reaches out his hand to her, but she only turns away from him irritably. In an attempt to get her attention, the protagonist whispers to her that they need to leave quickly before passers-by think they're a couple. This statement pisses Xiao off even more, and she looks at Han Sheng indignantly. In an attempt to smooth things over, the protagonist offers to walk Xiao to the train station and watch her leave. A tear rolls down the angry girl's cheek, and she declares that he wants to leave her, noting to herself that she didn't want to date him anyway. The protagonist tries to calm her down and says he will help her take her things to the train station and will not abandon her. Xiao abruptly bites his hand, which instantly gives the hero a deep shock. Passers-by observe the situation and side with Xiao, believing that the protagonist is a thug. The entire trio of main characters sit awkwardly at a bus stop, surrounded by suitcases and bags. On Han Shen's hand, which is partially hidden in his pocket, Xiao's bite mark can be seen quite strong. The girl looks guiltily at the protagonist's hand but says nothing about it. The main character stares bashfully at the ground, believing his reputation is ruined and everyone thinks he's a scumbag. Xiao also feels awkward, realizing that Han Sheng wants to find a girlfriend. She feels jealousy within her. Her shoulders are slumped and she catches Han Shen's attention by calling the hero by his name. The protagonist covers his eyes and sighs heavily, looking at the girl's condition. He opens his eyes and a slight smile can be seen on his lips. He asks if she is mad at him. Xiao looks at him with big eyes full of regret and tears and embarrassment. She lowers her tear-filled gaze and nods back in embarrassment. Han Sheng says that a lost walk in the park is no problem, but the girl disagrees with him, shaking her head. The protagonist's best friend suggests that he walk Xiao to the university and meet up with him later. His friend runs away very quickly, saying goodbye and leaving them alone with each other. Han Sheng is surprised by his friend's action while Xiao sits silently. The protagonist calls out to the girl who is still crying and asks her not to worry and to come with him. She quickly wipes away her tears with her hand and agrees to go with the protagonist. Han Sheng takes on most of the luggage, leaving Xiao to carry just one suitcase. The protagonist stares mysteriously and focused forward, covering part of his face with his hand. Han Sheng leisurely walks away from Xiao's dormitory where he escorted her to. He takes off his glasses and exhaling heavily says he's done with the trouble. Han Sheng drops his hand to the pocket of his pants and the edge of a white piece of paper peeks out. The pretty girl gave him the phone number of the dormitory, saying that you can contact them anytime, while a disgruntled Xiao stands in the background. The protagonist holds the piece of paper in his hands and smiles contentedly, thinking that it's impossible to refuse something like this. Against the wall, you can see a red banner with golden hieroglyphics on it, welcoming students. Looking at the main entrance of the university, Han Sheng thinks about the fact that he really missed so much, so a place he hasn't been to in 10 years. Among the crowd of students walking through the campus, a girl with long bangs is seen rushing somewhere. The girl suddenly crashes into Han Shen's shoulder, causing the piece of paper he was given earlier to fall out of his hands. With noticeable irritation, the protagonist calls out to the one that made him uncomfortable. The girl instantly starts apologizing to Han Sheng, and he can't help but notice that she's immensely cute. The hero smiles in response to her apology and says it's not necessary. The girl thanks him and runs away from the scene of the collision very quickly, leaving the protagonist in shock. Han Sheng picks up the fallen paper and tries to remember the girl he just ran into. The protagonist continues walking and thinks about how fast this stranger ran away. There are two people sitting at the table, an elderly man and a girl with a happy look. When Han Sheng approaches this table, he is asked if he is a student and Han Sheng confirms it. The girl sitting at the table turns out to be his classmate named Hu Lingyu. He knows that she will be a mentor for 4 years. Then the girl introduces an elderly man and says it is the teacher, Guo Junyun's supervisor. The teacher tells him to fill out the details and go to the dormitory. Han Sheng finishes filling out the paperwork, and behind his back you can see the gathering crowd of students. The girl notifies Han Sheng that he will be staying in the 3rd building, in a room in the protagonist thanks her and thinks about wanting to try to become a curator like her. Against the background of various buildings of the university, the protagonist says goodbye to the girl and the teacher, leaving them. Han Sheng looks closely at the various female students at the university, noting that they are much prettier and more attractive than high school girls. As he watches the girls, he realizes what attracts the attention of other guys and why they go to this university. He sighs heavily, and carrying his bag in his hands, he thinks about the fact that he needs to make money first before trying to find a girl. The bulletin board is filled with various writings and papers pinned to it, where it's hard to find a specific announcement. The protagonist finally finds something that suits him and hopes it will help him make money in the future. The sunset sky slowly turns to night sky, and the lights come on in the dormitory where the main character lives. The protagonist walks tiredly through the corridors of the dormitory thinking about how many people are here, and he was late while he went to get his things. Hansheng holds his things and smiles happily, thinking about how long it's been since he's been in this room. He puts his hand on the door, opening it slightly, letting the light penetrate the hallway, and thinks about the fact that his neighbors are still the same. He smiles and cheerfully greets his neighbors, asking if he was the last to arrive. He draws the attention of 3 people at once, but one of them is particularly happy to see him. Hansheng introduces himself and tells us what province he's from, and the guy in the yellow t-shirt happily shakes his hand. His neighbors are named Yang Shichao from northern Liaoning, Guo Xiaoqiang from Sudong, and Dai Zhengyu from Jibei. Attention turns to the remaining 2 neighbors, Li Daman from eastern Guangdong and Jin Yangming from Jianyu. Dai Zhengyu is completely shocked that Yangming has the latest Motorola model, and Yangming proudly confirms it. The protagonist is glad they stayed the same and didn't change at all. Yang offers cigarettes to the main character, saying that he is the oldest and Dai is the youngest. The main character listens attentively and suggests that everyone number themselves according to age. When the youngest is given cigarettes, he feels awkward but thanks. Li Daman and Jin Yangming refuse cigarettes, even though it is a sign of courtesy. The oldest guy is surprised at their refusal, and the second guy says there aren't enough types of cigarettes in the dorm. Yangming says that these are very cheap and bad cigarettes and they are of poor quality. He begins to make recommendations regarding cigarettes, as there are lighter and more flavorful options. The older man gets embarrassed and says that in his town he smoked only these cigarettes and had never heard of any others. Hansheng smokes quietly and thinks about how nice the students are that they can argue even about such a simple topic. The protagonist stares mysteriously and focused forward, covering part of his face with his hand. Hansheng, with a cigarette in his mouth, turns away and thinks about the 4 years of training ahead. He stares at the door of the dormitory and thinks about how the place has stunk for 4 years. His roommates hear the noise and turn to the source of the sound with surprise. They ask what Hansheng is up to, and Hansheng says that it is necessary to keep the room clean. The oldest suggests making the hero in charge of the room, and the others praise his decision about cleaning. His roommates discuss that it's a big responsibility. He'll have to be responsible for sleeping, eating, and even resolving conflicts. Hansheng says he has no problem accepting the position, and his roommates look at him with surprise and admiration. Against the backdrop of the dormitory at night, there are words of praise towards the protagonist for his responsibility and courage. Morning comes and the sun shines brightly, illuminating the hostel and surrounding streets. In the morning, the protagonist is awakened by the sound of Yangming's phone, which is too loud. Daman tells Hansheng that he will need to go to class today, so a uniform is needed. The protagonist's eyes widen with realization, and he abruptly realizes something important. He jumps out of bed and says it's a good time to meet the girls in the band. In the background of the open door, several students are seen wearing camouflage. In the classroom are a huge number of camouflage-clad girls who socialize among themselves, in small groups. The main character says that his classmates aren't very pretty, and Yangming mentions that he saw one very pretty girl. The protagonist turns to his roommates and suggests they go meet girls. Several of his roommates are embarrassed by this suggestion and answer him nothing. He confidently walks up to a crowd of girls, telling one of them that she looks good in a military uniform. The 4 girls socialize with each other, and among them is his handler, with whom he is already familiar. He greets this girl and is happy to see her again, and she recognizes him. The curator talks about being the only one of the 27 guys who dared to approach the girls. The protagonist introduces himself and asks if anyone from his Gangcheng province is here. One of the girls with a ponytail raises her hand and says she is from this province. Hansheng's roommates are impressed with his flirting skills and say that people like him are always popular. One of the girls says freshman year is very busy and she hopes he can take care of his roommates. You can see the confidence in the main character's eyes, and he says to help the teacher manage the group. He sees the girl he ran into yesterday and asks the handler if the girl is from their group. Who says she did and she forgot to introduce her. The stranger blushes heavily. The curator says the girl's name is Shen Yuchu, and she is her roommate. The girl first hides behind Hu's back and then walks away, and the curator asks for no comment. Hu explains that this girl has no parents, has low grades herself, and is studying for credit. The protagonist recalls that Shen was a diligent, intelligent student, but always saved a lot of money. The protagonist recalls a moment from the graduation ceremony of the undergraduate students of this university. That day, Shen borrowed an incredibly beautiful dress from someone and shocked the entire university. The protagonist recalls the details of the outfit and marvels at the girl's beauty. He thinks about their ties being severed in the future, But he won't let that happen this time. The protagonist stares mysteriously and focused forward, covering part of his face with his hand. The teacher coughs and thus gets the students' attention, saying that the assembly has begun. The instructor looks carefully at the students in the room and invites them to introduce themselves to each other. A girl with long red hair stands up and tells what province she's from. The protagonist's roommates begin to evaluate the girl, and Han Sheng is perplexed by their behavior. The main character's attention is drawn to the awkward and timid voice of a stansnicky girl. Shen stands near the board and speaks briefly about himself and his home province. The main character's roommates aren't impressed with the girl, but Han Sheng knows what lurks beneath that mask. The instructor talks about the need to select an elder as well as a representative of the second group. The eldest among Han Shen's companions suggests he become a headman, and the second roommate says he can help his friends. The curator of Hu's group looks at them and declares that they have no shame or conscience. She concentrates and thinks about trying harder since there are competitors. Hu turns to the shy girl and tells her to ignore the guys because they're stupid. Shen is very embarrassed by such words from Hu and blushes, feeling even more awkward than usual. Against a clear sky, the instructor's orders are given, which must be obeyed unconditionally. A man in military uniform declares that one of the heroes needs to cut off his hair because it doesn't fit the statute. The outraged student defends his appearance and says others have long hair too. Some female students wonder if they are also going to have their hair cut off, causing some girls to become hysterical. The student asks that Hu clarify this information with the instructor. Han Sheng and his comrade walk around the stadiums while the girls decide to defend their right to wear long hair. The main character sees Hu running away and decides he needs to show who the real leader is. He calls out to the instructor asking what he is doing, which immediately elicits a reaction from the military instructor. The protagonist stands with his hands in his pockets while his comrades stare at him in bewildered shock. The protagonist introduces himself and says he is a second-year student of public administration. The instructor is holding a pair of scissors, but the protagonist asks to be put away so there won't be a problem. The teacher looks at him with an intimidating look and tells him that long hair is not allowed in military training, which scares absolutely everyone. One of the protagonist's comrades begins to resent him, but the latter asks him to shut up. Han Sheng explains that the instructor was only invited for training and nothing more. He asks the instructor what his boss would think if he saw the one with the scissors. The instructor falls silent, and Han Sheng thinks about the fact that the instructor is too afraid of his superiors to object. He questions whether students are not allowed to walk around with long hair, but if such a rule exists, he will shave first. The instructor remains speechless and confused, not knowing what to say in response to the student. After a pause, the main character suggests that they wear caps so their hair doesn't get in the way and distract them in class. The instructor exhales heavily, but says the students can go easy this time. The protagonist asks his comrade to apologize, to which the latter begins to resent him. Through simple manipulation, Han Sheng still makes his comrade consider apologizing. Chenglong awkwardly walks over to the instructor, and without looking him in the eye, apologizes. The instructor closes his eyes and coughs awkwardly, thinking about something, and then begins to line up the group. The girl is grateful for the main character's courage, and some of them are even interested in him. A disgruntled Hu takes Shen's hand and begins to lead her away from the stadium. The protagonist asks his comrades to line up in a row, prompting them to do so. The instructor calls out the protagonist by first and last name, clearly preparing to say something. The teacher says that the main character smoked and thus broke the rules, and therefore he must run 10 laps. The protagonist becomes darker than a cloud, and one of his comrades laughs at the situation. The protagonist says that one of his comrades also smoked, so he has to run 5 laps. The instructor decides to punish both of them, so the protagonists are forced to run 10 laps. Both characters are incredibly tired from the run, but one of Hanshin's friends praises him for arguing with the instructor. The protagonist is annoyed and denies having an argument, blaming Chenglong for failing to remove his hair. To make it up to the protagonist, Chenglong offers him his help anytime, as well as dinner. Hu decides to give out ice cream to her classmates at this time, and they thank her. The girls eat ice cream and discuss Hu's desire to be in charge, which is why she bribes people so much. One of the girls says that Chen seems like the best option to her, but the other girl says it would be hard to discuss things with guys. One of the girls briefly says to vote for Hu, and the protagonist realizes that it's hard for girls to vote for him. He watches the instructor and instructor stand in the distance and discuss something of their own. Han Sheng smiles enigmatically and decides that he will have his own way of getting what he wants by using more powerful and important people to do so. The instructor asks the instructor to notify him or her immediately of any problems and offers dinner as an apology. The instructor sighs heavily, clearly not expecting such a situation with the instructor. The teacher is pulled out of his thoughts by the voice of the protagonist, who offers him a cigarette. The teacher takes a cigarette and asks Hanshin about the conflict, and the protagonist confirms that the conflict has been resolved. The teacher praises him for showing initiative, but doesn't have time to finish as his phone starts ringing. The protagonist listens carefully to the conversation and realizes that the teacher has personal problems and is swamped with work. The voice in the phone is yelling at the teacher that he is obligated to come and help, or he may never come again at all. The teacher looks shocked at the phone, and the protagonist asks if the wife called the teacher. Hansheng offers his help and says he can take the teacher's daughter, though the teacher is hesitant. Hansheng insists on his help, but the teacher fears that he doesn't know the city. But the hero assures him that he navigates this city and has relatives here. After a little thought, the teacher asks if the main character knows where Gulo Kindergarten is located. The protagonist, without delay, names the necessary route and even describes the terrain. The teacher asks if he lived nearby, and the main character says he did. Hansheng asks the teacher to contact the kindergarten teacher and says she will show her student ID to confirm her identity. The teacher gives the protagonist a phone and tells him that the meeting will end no later than 7 o'clock. Hansheng picks up the phone in his hands and says confidently that the teacher can rely on it. The protagonist shifts his gaze to the crowd of students, scrutinizing them. He looks at who is talking to the other girls, and says to himself that sometimes it's worth resorting to other means to get things done. The protagonist stares mysteriously and focused forward, covering part of his face with his hand. Near the daycare center, you can see many parents taking their children home. The main character comes to the daycare center to pick up a teacher's child. The tutor is incredulous at Hansheng, and he asks to call the teacher to confirm everything. The tutor calls the teacher and asks if it's true that his student has to pick up his daughter. Go's father confirms it. The educator looks at the protagonist and says she will ask for his number. She then turns away and continues to listen to what Father Guo is telling her. The educator notifies the protagonist that he or she needs to call out a number, and the protagonist has no problem calling it out. The caregiver confirms the validity of the number and ends the conversation with the child's father. She apologizes for her suspiciousness, but Hansheng stops her and says it's no big deal. The teacher explains to the girl that a student has come for her and will take her to her father. Hansheng asks Jiahui to go along with him and crouches down on his knees to be on the same level with her. The protagonist asks the child to say goodbye to the teacher, which the girl does. The main characters stop by KFC to have lunch and relax. Hansheng encourages the child to eat more and asks her some questions. The girl happily eats the burger and willingly agrees to answer all his questions. He asks if she knows her kindergarten teacher's number, and the girl says she doesn't. Hansheng asks her a question about the QR code, but the girl doesn't know exactly what it is. There is an awkward pause between the main characters, and the hero smiles embarrassedly at the child. Hansheng talks about how it's time for them to go home because the girl has already eaten a lot, but Jiahui asks him to stay a little longer. In the light of a night lantern, the protagonist notifies the teacher that his daughter is passing to him. The teacher's wife thanks the protagonist, while the teacher himself holds his sleepy daughter in his arms, and the protagonist says no thanks are necessary. The teacher's wife gives Hansheng fruit as a thank you and invites him to dinner, and the teacher himself offers to give the protagonist a ride to the bus stop. The main character smiles and thanks for the fruit given to him and the kindness shown to him. Near the entrance of the university, you can see a lot of students going about their business each, while Hansheng sits on a bench. He is sitting on a bench smoking, and the donated fruit is on the bench in a bag. The protagonist sees Xiao walking towards him and says it's past his bedtime. The girl's gaze is attracted by the fruit that lies in a bag on the bench. Xiao is excited about the fruit, asks where the protagonist bought it, and Hansheng says he picked it up at a nearby store. The girl listens attentively and a little surprised to the main character's statement. She fixes her hair and asks him if he called her just to give her the fruit. Xiao asks Hansheng not to spend so much money on her, and the protagonist says she's worth it. The girl wants to say something. She is interrupted by someone calling her name. She turns around and sees a guy with glasses who says he didn't expect to meet her here. All here greets him and says she heard he works at the Institute of Geology of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. The guy with the glasses shuts up and looks at the protagonist intently. After a while, he breaks the awkward silence and asks who the main character is. Hansheng smokes and says in parallel that he is Xiao Rongye's former classmate. He holds out a pack of cigarettes to a guy with glasses and offers them, but the guy refuses. The guy covers his nose as he clearly doesn't like the smell of tobacco that comes from cigarettes. He points with his hand to a folder of papers and says he has to go so the teacher can hand out the topics to them tomorrow. Xiao explains to Hansheng that this guy was going to be taken to the Academy of Sciences before he even graduated, and one day he came to them looking for a lab technician. The girl looks at the protagonist expecting some sort of reaction, but the protagonist just keeps smoking. After a while, he still looks at Xiao and asks what happened next. The girl looks down and says he offered her to be a lab technician. The main character sighs in surprise and averts his gaze from the girl. Xiao looks at him again and says she didn't take the lab technician job. The protagonist does not react to this in any way, which makes the girl terribly annoyed. Xiao starts to resent that Han Sheng smokes too much and he didn't have this habit before, and he should think about the future. She asks if he has any plans for the future, and the protagonist asks her again. Han Sheng looks at the cigarette and says he has plans to woo one girl. Xiao blushes. Xiao asks if the girl is pretty, and Han Sheng says he's never met a girl like that in all his years. She asks what will happen if the girl rejects the protagonist, and Han Sheng says he has no plans to give up and will wait. Xiao asks if the protagonist is interested in the opinions of the potential girlfriend's parents, but he says he's only interested in the opinion of the girlfriend herself, not the parents. Blushing, her eyes widen with deep embarrassment and a certain awkwardness. She abruptly runs away and tells the protagonist that she needs time to think. Han Sheng stares at the fleeing Xiao and scratches the back of his head, clearly shocked by her sudden change of mood. He stands still and wonders why Xiao needs to think about why he's chasing Shen Yuchu. The teacher welcomes the students and says that enough time has passed for the students to get to know each other and to choose a group leader. He states that initiative is encouraged, so every student can run for office. The protagonist's comrade asks him to run for office because he has already visualized his future if his friend becomes the headman. The first candidate is a girl, and one of the main character's friends looks at him unhappily, thinking that he missed the chance. Hu gets up from his seat and the instructor says to welcome the candidate. Students actively applaud candidate Hu, including her roommate Shen. Hu introduces herself and says that many students may know her because she helped with registration. She states that she is enthusiastic and will always help her classmates in studies and other matters, and will ensure a better future for the group. The teacher thanks her for her performance and applause erupts through the classroom, with Shen clapping especially vigorously. The girl returns to her seat, and the teacher thanks her for such a speech and hopes that the same spirit is adopted by the next candidate. Shen raises her gaze and sees the main character walking by, holding her attention on him longer. The main character notices her gaze and turns his attention to her, smiling slightly. Han Sheng walks out to the blackboard and smiles confidently while the teacher behind him looks at him with interest. Thunderous applause spreads through the audience in honor of the protagonist. His roommates actively support him and wish him luck. He begins his speech with a little joke, and the teacher remarks to himself that he has lightened the mood. Han Sheng promises that he will communicate with each teacher before the exam, thus helping students, and will fight for their scholarships and grants. He mentions that there is a big difference between their university and the neighboring one, so they need to accustom themselves to discipline. Shen listens to his speech very carefully, especially when he mentions that he will ensure that they have a good future if they choose him as the headman. Lastly, the hero says that students can vote for him if they believe in Han Sheng. The instructor notes that the main character has many strengths, such as being organized and having leadership skills. The teacher writes the results of the vote on the board and the students give the last vote to Han Sheng. The instructor announces that, by a vote of 27 points, the protagonist has been made headman. Hu is very disappointed with this voting result, and Shen tries to support her. The protagonist thanks everyone for their votes while his comrades praise him. Hu reminds her roommate that men are very unreliable and not to forget that. A disillusioned girl walks across the university campus, thinking that everything has lost its meaning. Suddenly, the protagonist calls out his opponent by name, getting her attention. She grudgingly turns around on the protagonist, expecting him to be about to brag about his new position. Han Sheng states that he wants to take her out to dinner because they need to talk. The girl blushes with embarrassment and incomprehension, and there is an awkward pause between them. Hu asks if he decided to become a headman to make her fall in love with him. The hero says he just wanted to discuss the details of management with the girl. To prove his pure intentions, he offers to call a girlfriend with him. Shen blushes in the presence of the protagonist as he says that he invited them to discuss something important. Hu declares that he shouldn't expect a blessing from her and her friend. The girl reminds him that a few days ago he called the guys over for dinner but ignored the girls. Hu rises from her seat and leaves to get food, though Shen asks that she not be left alone with the protagonist. The girl is very blushing and embarrassed sitting in front of the main character, but he doesn't say anything. Han Sheng stares intently at the girl across from him, as if memorizing details. The main character notes to herself and her physical attributes and beauty. Shen finally dares to raise her gaze to him, but she doesn't stop blushing for a second. The protagonist smiles at her in return for eye contact, which makes the girl twitch. His smile grows bigger while the girl burns with embarrassment. Hu returns to their table with a tray full of food and tells the protagonist the cost of the dishes. They begin their meal and Hu asks the protagonist what he wants from her and what the point of their meeting is. Han Sheng smirks and says he has one important thing to do with her, piquing her interest. To the shocked looks of both girls, he declares that he wants to give the position of headman to Hu. The girl incredulously interjects whether the protagonist is really going to hand over the position to her. Hu questions the protagonist's adequacy by asking him a direct question to that effect, and looks at him with a kind of contempt. He states that he's fine, but he wants to know why she wants to be a head girl. He's interested in her motives. The girl, after a little thought, replies that she wants to help students, but the main character does not believe her from the word at all. Hu awkwardly averts her gaze as if she's been caught red-handed and exposed. She says she wants to be a public servant in the future, so she wants the experience of a head teacher, which is valuable in such a job. He understands her motives and realizes that she wants a career, while the girl can't understand why he asks this and what his true goals are. Han Sheng declares that he's only interested in money, to which Hu says she has no connections. He says that because of this position, his influence would have increased, and the girl remarks that it's a great tool for getting things done. When asked by the hero if their opinions agree, the girl tries to say that she is not. Hu's roommate eats quietly and listens to their conversation, where the main character states that he only needs this position for a year because he is not interested in being a headman. Shen is very uncomfortable with this situation. The blush doesn't leave her face, so she thanks for the food and wants to leave. The protagonist tells her in a rather harsh tone to go back to her seat, forbidding her to leave. This causes the girl to go into panic mode and blush madly, and her roommate Hu begins to vigorously defend her. The main character slides a peeled plate of shrimp over to the girl and says he bought this especially for her. The girl twitches in surprise, but the protagonist asks her to finish her meal, pointing at her plate with his hand. Shen clutches the brownie in her hands in embarrassment and says redder, mixed with panic, that you don't have to do that for her. Hu observes the whole situation with incomprehension, while the protagonist asks why Shen refuses to eat shrimp. Does she feel disgusted, and she can't understand what's going on? The characters look at her with confusion, incomprehension, and some resentment in their eyes, not understanding her reaction. He leans over to her and takes her hand in which she is holding a pie and asks if it is so delicious, and for that reason, he wants to taste it, which leaves the girl shocked. After tasting the pie, the protagonist declares that the taste is not bad, while the girl still can't get away from the shock and looks at him with wide-open eyes. Stammering and sweating, Shen tries to say something to the protagonist, but is interrupted by a reprimand from her roommate, who calls the protagonist a not-so-good person. The future headman doesn't understand this reaction and says they still need to cooperate, at which point Hu is seething with rage and her friend is burning with total embarrassment. Tilting his head slightly, Han Sheng says that he has always thought that the girl named Shang Yanyan is the most beautiful in the group. Han Sheng continues to stare at Shen and says that he now realizes who is really the most beautiful in their group, while Hu says that this is some kind of strange and incomprehensible evaluation. Hu says that not many people know about Yuichu's true appearance and beauty, so the main character has to keep everything a secret because she is very timid and her friend is afraid that she might run into bad people. Han Sheng has no problem agreeing to this, but asks her not to look at him so closely when Hu talks about bad people, to which she replies that men all have the same thoughts. The protagonist thinks he made the right strategic move and decided to continue building a relationship with the potential headman, and after a brief pause, says it's worth continuing their conversation. He offers Hu a deal in which he says that in his second year, he will give up his position as head teacher, but the girl asks what guarantees he can give her on that score. The protagonist offers her the following plan. During her freshman year, she can support everyone by gaining attention, creating a pleasant image among the teachers and students. She can also join the counselor squad, which will help her pass her exams. Hu thinks the protagonist is trying to dump the dirty work on her. The hero tries to convince her that everything that belongs to him will belong to her, to which she asks what else he can promise her. Han Sheng looks at her with a confident smile and says that they can split the duties, where she will be in charge of the smaller matters and he will be in charge of the bigger ones. The girl looks at him with skepticism and asks what will happen if she refuses the deal the hero is so actively trying to offer her. Han Sheng doesn't fall for her provocation and says that if that's the case, he'll work even harder to make sure she doesn't stand a chance because universities rarely change head teachers. After this outburst, Hu has no words left and shuts up, but the protagonist says that he will help her in all matters and in all matters. The girl looks at him with increasing irritation and tells him that he is clearly lying to her and clearly demands that he not, showing her unconcealed disgust for him. The hero tries to use his charisma and props his chin up with his hand and says that he is always honest, sincere with everyone, looking Hu straight in the eye. From such direct and intense eye contact, Even the confident Hu blushes as if her body is electrocuted by this attitude. The girl abruptly jumps up from the table and says that she agrees to the deal with the main character and tells her friend and neighbor that they have to go, and her neighbor quietly agrees with her. Han Sheng sees them off with a slow and confident gaze, glad that his plan was successful, and he was able to convince Hu to do what he wanted. From the establishment, which hangs a large red sign with white hieroglyphics on it, come the voices of students celebrating the end of their military training. Students actively clink glasses and drink to their heart's content, while a variety of different classic Chinese appetizers are laid out on the table. Gao says that Xiao needs to eat more and that they can get together more often that way since the classmates attend universities near each other, but Xiao dismisses his concern. The protagonist's best school friend sits next to him with a disgruntled face, Han Sheng himself asking him what's wrong with his mood. His best friend complains to him that at his finance university, he has 62 people in his group, and of those only 2 are girls, and his days are more like being in a convent. Han Sheng looks at him wide-eyed and asks what about those 2 girls. Instead of answering his question, his best friend silently continues to drink, as if unwilling not to answer. Han Sheng sympathetically claps him on the back, understanding his situation, and tells him to calmly continue drinking without worrying about anything. Xiao says that university is all about studying, not relationships, but the main character's best friend says that if there are any available girls in her major, she'd better keep quiet. Gao suggests the protagonist sit closer to Xiao and asks her opinion of her, to which the protagonist looks at Gao perplexed. Han Sheng lightly touches Xiao's shoulder as he reaches for the toothpicks, apologizing in passing for his actions and throwing Gao and Xiao into complete shock. Ignoring the disgruntled cries of Gao, the protagonist's best friend thinks to himself that he too wants to act swaggering like Han Sheng. Xiao says they rarely get together, so they should definitely talk about their accomplishments. Gao is thinking about hurting Han Sheng, so he asks him to start talking first about achievements and successes. Han Sheng leisurely lights a cigarette, waiting for a certain dramatic pause before giving his response to his classmates. He lets out a cigarette smoke and looks away, then declares that he is the head man of his group. This throws Gao into total shock. He clearly didn't expect this from the protagonist, and Xiao looks at him with great surprise. The protagonist's best friend doesn't believe him either, and cries out that Han Sheng is definitely lying. Gao tries to accuse the protagonist of misbehavior, and says that someone like him definitely couldn't become the group's headman. The focus shifts from the main character to his best friend, and he is asked about his academy. He mentions that his academy's infrastructure isn't bad, that there's a restaurant they can go to together in the future. The classmates quietly agree. Han Sheng smokes in silence, thinking that his classmates are a bunch of sentimental kids who pretend to be serious people. Gao thinks about the fact that he has been writing the benefits of his university all evening, and hopes that Xiao will transfer to his university after hearing this. At the moment when Gao is finally asked about his university, someone calls out to the protagonist. In front of him is Hu, who notifies him that once classes start, the group is offering to hold various activities and asks him what kind of payment he will take as a headman. The protagonist says he needs to step back to talk, and Xiao and Gao look at the girl in surprise. He notifies Hu that the fee is 50 yuan per person, and despite Hu's doubts, Hu says it's a bit expensive, he claims it's just right. He looks at the girl and asks that she give this 50 yuan to her friend Shen Yuchu. For a while, the girl stares at him with an incomprehensible and blank stare, clearly intending to ask him a question. She then takes her eyes off the hero and moves her gaze to his classmates who are sitting in the cafe waiting for him. Ignoring the shocked Gao and the best character's friend, she notices Xiao, who looks at Han Sheng with surprise. Hu instantly realizes what exactly is going on and turns his gaze back to the protagonist. She abruptly takes the money from the protagonist and says that she hopes the headman will feel good. Han Sheng is surprised by her behavior and change of mood. A delighted Xiao gets up from the table and once again asks the protagonist if he's really the headman, obviously proud of him. Gao tries to belittle Han Sheng's achievement by saying that the headmasters are just servants and are far from being members of the student union he is about to join. The main character doesn't respond to the attempt to hurt him and say that he thinks exactly the same as Gao. The protagonist's best friend inquires about his new love interest, and Han Sheng perplexedly asks him when he got intoxicated. His friend keeps whispering to him that he thinks Han Sheng is trying to get Zhao's attention this way, but the protagonist asks him to be quiet. The classmates begin to say goodbye to each other, and then offer to go together to a station nearby. In the background of the station building are huge inscriptions made in gold hieroglyphics, and a farewell is heard in the background. Han Sheng is about to leave the station when suddenly the girl calls out to him, obviously wanting to say something. Xiao looks down as if gathering her thoughts before saying what she thinks. After a while, She shifts her gaze to the protagonist, gathering her confidence and preparing to make her point. She shouts loudly to the whole street that she appreciates the persistence of the protagonist, which attracts the attention of absolutely all passersby. Such a loud statement throws Han Sheng off balance, and he stares at Xiao with wide-open, shocked eyes. Against a background of trees, the main character lights another cigarette, with a distinctive sound. The protagonist sits on a bench, gloomier than a cloud, thinking that he has ruined Xiao's relationship, and now she thinks he is an extremely strange person. The action unfolds in the daytime. The protagonist is on the street, near multi-story buildings. The protagonist walks up to the office building and says he's already at the location, near the Shengtong Express. He looks at the warehouse workers and notes that there is no dress code. As a result, all the workers dress however they want. He decides to take matters into his own hands. A character approaches a worker and holds out a cigarette to him. He asks if the director of the establishment is present. He takes a cigarette and replies that Director Jun is on the second floor. The protagonist thanks him for his answer. The hero goes up to the second floor and enters the office of the director of the Shentong Express. The director sits at his desk in a spacious office and writes something on a piece of paper. He does not notice the hero at first. When the principal turns his attention to the newcomer, he asks who it is. The protagonist pulls up a sheet indicating a job opening. He says he saw a part-time job offer. The director asks where he's from, and the protagonist replies that he's from Kaiyuan. The director replies that someone has already come from his place. The director falls silent, but then an idea pops into his head. He turns to the main character. The boss suggests that the character go back. The character hears him but does not want to give up. He asks his boss what he needs to do to replace that worker and get his job. Hearing this, the company director thought about the guy's suggestion for a couple seconds. He says that the protagonist wants to go all out. The character feels that such a reaction from him is a bad sign. He says he sees nothing wrong with wanting to pick up something vacant, as he just wants to make money for himself. The principal thinks the main character is a little strange. He says that if you look at his clothes, he lives quite well. He wonders why the protagonist needs a job in that case. The hero holds out a cigarette to the director. He says that this is not a big office, and there is no point in checking the entire pedigree of each employee. The director replies that although the protagonist is very persistent, he can't just take one employee and replace him with another. The director says that the company is doing well right now and they are delivering a lot of packages. He replies that this is why they have no desire to change agents. The boss says that if the protagonist can increase the number of daily references to 100, he'll give him a job. The protagonist thinks it's a good offer and asks the director if he has a business card. The boss pulls out his card and holds it out to the protagonist. He takes it from his hand. The character turns around, opens the doors and leaves after saying goodbye to the company boss. The director returns to his papers, and already after the protagonist leaves, notices that he is a curious man. Next, the action unfolds on the streets of the city. Voices are heard there, inviting the inhabitants to work in the animation club. The main character is walking down the street and thinking. He thinks that in the future, he will have to work with rich people and with many stores. Then he thinks about the fact that at university, the easiest way to make acquaintances is to join some club or union. He gets in a long line to an office that is signed as the External Affairs Department. Some of the students notice him and recognize him. They are surprised that their head teacher has come here. A pretty girl asks the hero if he came here to join the student association. He smiles uncertainly and says that for the good future of their group, someone has to join here. Hearing this, the girls look at each other and, not sure what to say to that, they hold hands and get ready. They say they'll go to a few more clubs. Heroes tells them he can buy them breakfast tomorrow. He says goodbye to them in a friendly manner. In the queue, he is noticed by a guy who is clearly displeased. The hero notices this guy's negative reaction and can't figure out what caused it in his direction. The guy looks away and says nothing, continuing to scowl at him silently. An invitation to come in sounds from the committee. The protagonist goes inside the office and stands in front of 3 people. He notices that this guy frowning at him is one of the judges in the office. They look at each other, the guy looking at the hero with obvious hostility. The protagonist wants to politely introduce himself and give his name to the committee, but he is interrupted in the middle of a sentence. The guy who had antipathy towards him says it's not worth introducing yourself as they only recruit girls. The main character is not happy about being shut out. He gets angry at the selection committee. The girl from the committee whispers to the guy that she doesn't recall such conditions of recruitment to the club. He replies that he will explain everything to her later. He tells the hero that their committee often deals with business and sponsorship issues. He thinks that girls are better suited for such things, and that the hero should leave and not take up everyone else's time. The girl next to me points out that actually they've picked a guy to serve on the commission before. The main character starts to get angry and asks the guy if this is really what everyone needs. The latter is surprised by the hero's open reaction to what is happening. The conflict between them begins. The audience is surprised and begins to scrutinize the altercation between the two guys. The committee member is getting annoyed. He thinks about the fact that every year the freshmen are getting harder and harder to keep in line. He says his name is Wei Wei. He starts to calm the protagonist down, and the protagonist says that he is completely calm, but he wants to talk to the manager. The commission is shocked by such a statement. He does not believe his ears and interrogates the hero. The protagonist approaches a guy and starts saying that it is a strange gender discrimination. He replies that girls are the best at keeping in touch. The hero says the most important thing is getting the job done right and not the gender of the employee at all. He also says that if only girls are wanted here, what is this guy doing here and why do they need him? The people around him side with the protagonist and tell the guy to leave on his own. Suddenly, a man appears behind them and says they should stop this buffoonery as this is a club, not a bazaar. The main character turns around and looks at the newly arrived guy. He doesn't recognize him. With a disgruntled look, the protagonist asks him who he is. The one answers and introduces himself as the vice president of the student union named Zuo Xiaoli. Zuo Xiaoli walks into the office and says that if there is any problem, he can call security. The protagonist calmly replies to the vice chairman that in that case, it is time for him to leave. The deputy chairman asks in surprise where to go. The hero replies that he can call the guards himself. Zuo Xiaoli looks at the person in charge with bewilderment. He doesn't know what to say to such insolence. He asks which group the protagonist is from and who his counselor is. The hero answers that he is the head of the second group and offers to give him his number. The vice chairman is surprised at such insolence from a freshman at his address. The girls come into the office and stand up for the headman. They support him and say that they have called the boys with them. The girl from the commission approaches the protagonist and asks him not to quarrel. She says that he has already passed the interview and now he has to wait for the result. The character calms down and smiles at the girl. He says it's okay to not worry in that case. The guy from the committee starts complaining about the main character's behavior, his arrogance and spiteful attitude towards the members of the club. The protagonist replies that there is no clause in the rules that prohibits freshmen from joining the club. The audience sides with the protagonist and says that if he can join, then why are the judges stopping him? The vice chairman says that all responsibility lies with him and asks the protagonist if he could guarantee to get sponsorship with this position. The hero asks if Zuo Xiaoli himself can guarantee this. The deputy with a smug look replies in the affirmative. The hero says that in that case he can easily handle it too, which causes the deputy to react indignantly. The audience sides with the protagonist and says it's time to allow freshmen to join without relying on their gender. The deputy says they could use some help from the freshmen. He thinks about giving the main character a chance to prove himself. He wants to compare which of them will be able to raise more sponsorships in total. The girl next to him says that Zhou Xiao has a better chance because he has experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The vice chairman asks if the protagonist wants to participate in this financial competition. The hero confidently asks what happens if he wins and raises more money from sponsorships. He replies that in that case, he can take over as club employee instead of the commission guy. The protagonist willingly agrees. The guy is surprised by this. He didn't expect such an answer. The protagonist points to the people standing nearby and says that since there are many witnesses here, he won't be able to renege on his promise. They are assigned rules. At the beginning, they randomly select a person to count the amount of sponsorships. Whoever collects the most sponsorships wins. They are asked if they are clear about the rules. The protagonist's opponent answers in the affirmative. The protagonist isn't sure how reliable the system is with randomly selecting a person, but he confidently agrees to the terms. The protagonist's opponent was assigned a place, a barbershop. The protagonist was assigned a stationery store nearby. The enemy begins to move away from them and says with confidence that they'll see who wins here yet. The rest of the crowd watches from afar as the guy talks to the barbershop management. Jan tells the protagonist that the barbershop opened recently, but the store has been open for a long time. The protagonist tells him not to worry. Returns the protagonist's rival, he says satisfied that he has collected 200 sponsorships and a coupon for 300 yuan. The protagonist is unimpressed. He drops his cigarette, steps away from his opponent, and walks toward the crowd of students. He's approached by a girl who offers her help. She says she will start for him since he is only a freshman. She walks into the store, greets the owner, and apologizes for the disturbance. The owner tells her to pass. She starts to explain to him that their club is collecting sponsors for the faculty. With a sharp and quick movement, the salesman hits the table with a book. A loud sound is heard. He tells the student that he has as much debt as it is, so he can't sponsor anything. The girl says he pulls out this book every time he is asked about sponsorship. The main character thinks about the fact that it is hard for people to earn money. The salesman shows the book and says that if the students help him deal with the debt, he can sponsor them. The girl is getting upset. She is sure that they will not be able to get anything from this man. The hero's rivals and club members look on smugly, confident that he will lose the contest. Suddenly, the main character approaches the store owner and tells him that he can help him deal with his debts. The salesman is surprised to hear this. He didn't expect such an offer from the students. The store owner agrees to these terms. The hero says that he will deal with everything before the afternoon. The clerk gives him directions. He needs to go to the store across the street. There he comes out another shopkeeper. There stands an intimidating-looking middle-aged man with a large knife in one hand and a watermelon in the other. The girls are frightened by the sight of him. They don't want to go to that shop and mistake the man for a butcher, not a fruit seller. The opponents are pleased with this reaction of the girls. They think that they will be afraid to go there and thus lose the competition. But the protagonist confidently approaches the store owner with a confident expression and a slight smirk. He smiles at the salesman and says in a confident tone that he needs a promissory note for that account. The action unfolds near a fruit store in the market. The heroes stand in front of the shop of a threatening fruit seller. The vendor brings his huge cleaver over the fruit slicing board. It looks menacing. With one strong blow, he chopped the watermelon into 2 equal pieces with a loud sound. The main character's friends don't like that they have to go to this man, but the main character doesn't react in any way. His friends start convincing him that the debt isn't that important. They think this salesman is not very socially inclined. The protagonist replies to them that if they are afraid, he can go alone. They are surprised by this statement. The protagonist's opponent asks the vice chairman if he should win. He does not answer him. The protagonist approaches the shopkeeper. He looks at him, wiping his knife with a rag. He asks the protagonist and the 2 friends behind him what they need from him. The hero smiles politely and tells the owner that he doesn't need the fruit and that he needs the money. Hearing this from the protagonist, the salesman looks at him with a frown from under his eyebrows. Then he takes another hard stab and cuts the watermelon into quarters. A loud clang is heard as the knife hits the wood. The owner looks at them and interjects to ask what kind of money we're talking about. The watermelon juice on his knife looks like blood, making it look even more menacing. The main character's friends are even more frightened by the man. Despite this, the protagonist himself remains calm. He takes a small piece of watermelon from the vendor's kitchen board in his hands and begins to eat it. He calmly and confidently tells the man that he came from the stationery store across the street. He says he owes the shopkeeper 3,500 yuan and has yet to pay back. The shopkeeper is surprised by the boldness and brazenness of the protagonist. He finds it strange that he is not afraid of him at all. He asks when the store owner hired the protagonist. He replies that he doesn't have to worry about that, and asks again about the money. The salesman says he doesn't owe 3,500 yuan. The hero says he does as he is told. The salesman then turns his attention to the main character's friends and asks him what kind of people they are. The protagonist smiles and says that these are his classmates, and that if he doesn't pay back what he owes, they will have to take the fruit from him for the right amount of money. The owner gets angry upon hearing such a threat and yells at the protagonist, asking how dare he do such a thing. He goes into the back. He complains that he only owes 2,500 and that the owner of the stationery store sent students to him. The protagonist's friends hope the salesman won't get into a fight. We hear the noise of him looking for something among his things. Finally, he comes back, shows a promissory note, and yells that he only owes 2,500 yuan. The protagonist agrees to the amount. The seller told him to return his receipt. The hero says that apparently he had misheard, and that the seller only owes 2,500 yuan. The protagonist says that he now has physical evidence of the debt and asks the shopkeeper to pay him back. He yells at him. The other students support the protagonist and tell the store owners to pay back the debt. He starts yelling at them and asks what will happen if he doesn't repay his debt. Seeing the crowd that is gathered around the store, a policeman approaches them. He is trying to understand why so many people have gathered here. He turns to the shopkeeper and says that he needs to keep the rest of the store from interfering with his trade and disperse the crowd of people. The shopkeeper says that everyone will soon disperse. He gets even angrier at the protagonist, but he just stands there and smiles politely. The protagonist and his friends come to a stationery store and hold out the right amount of money to the shopkeeper. He says he didn't think the money would come back to him anymore and thanks the character and his friends. He reaches out his hands to grab a wad of money, but the protagonist stops him. The owner asks what's wrong. The protagonist replies that by contract this money belongs to him, since he wrested it from the debtor. The owner complains that you're too much money and offers him 500 yuan, but no more. The students say they agreed otherwise, and the host has to reluctantly agree with them. The protagonist has received money in the direction of sponsorship. He looks contentedly in the direction of his rivals in the competition. He holds out the girl's money and says that he received 501 yuan from the owner. She is surprised by this. The main character's rivals stand behind them and look on with disgruntled faces at what is happening. The protagonist looks in their direction confidently, then asks the girl what's wrong. The girl looks at him unhappily, and for a couple seconds says nothing and takes the money from his hand. Why she reluctantly snatches the bills from the protagonist with a sharp motion and accepts his victory. Voices are heard everywhere congratulating the character on his victory. The members begin to leave, clearly upset by what has just happened. The students shout after them that they are contractually obliged to vacate the chairman's seat. The protagonist thinks that they will not do it. The hero tells his acquaintances that he will buy them a drink. They rejoice. The rivals leave the building. The students are outraged that the club members have ignored their promise. They believe that they will not quit until they are forced to. One of the main character's friends looks after the departing club chairman and thinks about the reason for his action. He thinks about the fact that the chairman can't afford to lose credibility in the eyes of other students. It is already nighttime outside. The main character is in the building with the rest of the students. They are playing cards. One of them shouts out that he has collected 4 kings and that victory is his. His opponent loses. John gives a flick to the main character. He complains that Yang has beaten him again in a game of cards. Just then, another student runs into the dorm room. He shouts the news. Zhu Chenglun and Zhou Xiao had a fight with each other. Yang and the protagonist are surprised. Yang says that Zhou is not that kind of person at all. The protagonist asks where the two are. The 2 men who got into a fight are in the dormitory. A dense crowd is standing near them and discussing what is happening. They believe that the 2 guys had been drinking beforehand. Ian and the main issue approach the crowd. The hero does not like what is happening and the fact that the problems are not ending in any way. Just then, the students hear a voice beside them. One of the teachers wants to go through the crowd. One of the guys in the fight is covered in scratches and bruises. He looks at the teacher in front of him. Zhou Xiao stares unhappily at the wall and pays no attention to the other students in the room. The protagonist enters the room. He turns to Teacher Go, who says he was just about to find him. The teacher looks sternly at the students and asks the protagonist if he knows what happened here. The protagonist looks at the guys fighting and begins to ponder the reasons for the fight that took place. He decided that Zhou Xiao had said slanderous things about him, which led to a fight between the 2 members. He thinks about the fact that if he exonerates himself, everyone will think that Cheng Lun is to blame. It might come to the point of expelling him. The hero is not sure what to do. He believes that the current situation could greatly damage his reputation. He thinks about the fact that this fight and its resolution is complicated and difficult to resolve without casualties. The teacher tells the protagonist to stop keeping quiet and tell what he knows about what happened. Cheng Lun hesitantly starts to address the teacher, but his sentence is interrupted halfway through without letting him finish. The main character states that he knows what happened here, even though it's not true. Cheng Lun is greatly surprised by this. The teacher says that the headman should not be involved in such scuffles and tells him to write an explanatory note. He promises to do it the same evening. The teacher says he needs to talk to Zhou Xiao after his explanation, after which he will be punished for what happened. The hero apologizes to Zhou Xiao. He frowns and looks at the guy with hostility. The hero continues to apologize. At the same time, the doctor offers to examine the injured students. He walks up to Zhou Xiao and starts to do an inspection, touching his wounds and asking him where he is hurting. The teachers look at each other. The doctor states that everything is fine and that there is no need to prescribe medicine or treatment. The gathered curious students begin to disperse and are told that it is time for them to go to their rooms to sleep. The hero tells Cheng Long to leave the scene of the fight back to his room. He has a frustrated look on his face. He agrees, turns around and starts to leave. The only 2 people left in the room are the protagonist and Zhang Xiao. They sit across from each other and are silent. There is a sense of tension in the room. Zhang Xiao is the first to speak. He tells the protagonist to stop pretending to be a good person. The protagonist doesn't immediately respond to this, quietly cleaning up the scattered items. He then turns to his interlocutor and says that he only did it because he is a university student. Otherwise, he wouldn't have helped even if Zhang Xiao was dying. Zhang Xiao is surprised to hear this. The protagonist says that he hopes someone else will use it. Then he turns around and starts to walk away from the room with his hands in his pockets. The students in the hallway look at him curiously. Cheng Lun, seeing him, starts to apologize. He says that he didn't mean for things to turn out this way between them. Instead of answering the guy, the main character gives him a strong kick in the leg. Cheng Long falls to the ground with a loud sound. A student asks if Cheng Lun is okay. He says he deserved that punch and has no complaints. The students hesitantly reassure the guy and say that the headman will forgive him, since he went to such a step for him. In response, Cheng Lun just sits silently and stares at the floor. He is clearly very upset about what happened. Outside, the teachers are talking to each other at the same time. One says he didn't expect this, another agrees with him. One of them says the head teacher is very helpful. The other one talks about the student union. He thinks the head of his class is too wild. The teacher says that Zhang Xiao is smart and decided to take a risk this time to show that no one else deserves his position. The second teacher smokes a cigarette outside and agrees with the first teacher's words. He then asks what will happen to his student. The other replies that he does not want to upset the principal, so he will not tell him about anything. The action then moves to the 602nd room of the university. The students have gathered there to discuss today's incident. The main character is sitting on a chair. He turns his back to the others and says nothing to them, only listens. Cheng Lun apologizes to him. He says he lost his temper over drinking. Other students support him and say he has already admitted his guilt. Another student notices that the protagonist is eerily silent. The protagonist holds out a cigarette to Cheng Long. Upon seeing it, Cheng Lun is overjoyed and takes it from the protagonist's hands. He starts to tell him, but is interrupted. The protagonist says that the incident was not useless. The students are surprised by this. The hero smokes and tells the others that after today, Zhang Xiao is very limited in what he can do. The action unfolds in a university. The members of the club gather in the office and invite the protagonist. They ask if he would be willing to take over as the club's vice chairman of public relations. The main character responds positively. He says that he will not let them down and will live up to their expectations. They say that after Zhou Xiao's recent resignation, and after him a seat became available. The decision to accept the protagonist was unanimous. They say he will take office after the feast is over. The hero thanks them. Zhou Xiao is not happy with what is happening. He doesn't say anything and starts to leave the office. He then addresses the rest of the club. He says that the main character is not as simple as he seems at first glance. He then adds that they will regret their decision to accept the protagonist for the vacancy. The hero asks if the guy has anything else to say about him. He says no, he doesn't want to say anything else. He says that in that case they'll meet again, and starts to leave the club's office. The others are awkwardly silent. The guy from the club thinks it's such a thank you. The girl says that she was asked to support the candidacy of the protagonist and that she cannot fail. Then the events unfold on October 1st, during the national holiday. There's a crowd of students in the street. The protagonist says that the girl's father shouldn't have met her. She replies that in that case, she would have had to take the bus. They hear the driver say it's time for them to hit the road. The car has 7 seats and belongs to Uncle Xiao. The student says that Henshin needs to behave maturely considering their age. Chen is getting tired of it. The driver tells the characters to get in the car and move their luggage and belongings to the back. A girl sits in the passenger seat. There is only one free seat next to her. The student is excited to sit next to her. He opens the door and prepares to enter the car. The protagonist tells him to let him pass him in the front, as he wants to sit in the back seat of the car. He lets him pass. He thinks that everything is going well and that he can get in with the girl. Then he looks at the hero and sees that he didn't sit in the back seat, but next to the girl, and now it's occupied. He asks if he didn't want to sit back down, but the man replies that he had time to change his mind. The student is driven over and told to get in the car. He is angry at the protagonist's deception, but finally gets in. The car prepares to depart. The student complains about the protagonist's behavior and says that he will never take his word for it again. The driver tells the students to fasten their seatbelts. They gradually start to drive. A student in the back seat is trying to strike up a conversation with a girl. He asks about which club she has joined. She says that she is not sure where to join yet, as she has too many options in front of her. He starts bragging and says that he joined the publicity club and now he doesn't have to worry about anything. Another passenger says he wanted to join the organizations club but was not accepted. A girl replies that she would like to join the student union. They then ask the hero, to which he replies that he is the vice president of public relations in the student union. He is told that he is already the head of his group at the university, and where else can he strive? He can't believe the protagonist has become vice chairman for public relations in the student union. The driver listens to the conversation and thinks about how he's sure the protagonist has really taken over, judging from his experience with him. A student starts telling me that a freshman wouldn't be allowed in such a position. You have to be too outstanding for it. He asks for the hero's opinion, but the hero brushes it off and says he doesn't want to talk about all sorts of nonsense. After a while, the car stops on the street. The sound of the brake is heard. The students get out of the car. The driver says here they are saying goodbye as he still has business to attend to. Then the car sets off and drives away from them. The students look after it. The girl says she has a lot of stuff and is offered help to carry it. She notices that something is wrong with the main character and asks him about it. She looks worried. She says that she wants her things Nem Chen Hanshin. He looks at her without any visible reaction. Hearing this, the student says that he himself can help the girl carry the bags. He's taken away, but he's not happy that he couldn't stay with the girl and help her, and that the chance went to the main character. The hero thinks about the fact that he could have arrived earlier and not carried other people's things. At least he helped the man save money on train fare. He tells the girl to be careful, but she has already run ahead and started eating the candy on a stick. She offers to let him have one of those too, but he confidently declines the offer. Hearing a negative answer, she frowns and looks at the protagonist unhappily. The guy gives up and with a deep sigh agrees to eat the same sweetness. She suddenly walks up to the guy and extends the stick with the sweet treat right into his mouth. This takes him by surprise, but he starts to eat. For a while they are silent and say nothing. She starts to tell him something about something that happened recently but is interrupted. The protagonist looks deep into the crowd and sees someone. The main character's father stands there, looking perplexed at the awkward scene between the guy and the girl. The girl hasn't noticed him yet. The protagonist begins to think how he can get out of this situation. Further events unfold in the evening. The heroes came to a billiard club to spend time there and relax. The main character is standing near a pool table with a cue in his hands. His friend says that he didn't expect that they could find such nice places in the city. Then he notices two attractive girls walking up the stairs beside them. They possess how yesterday the main character saw his father on a walk. He says his father was silent. He also says that his father knows Yao. They continue playing billiards and the protagonist scores a ball. After hitting, he hands the cue to his friend and says it's his turn to hit. He notices that the girls nearby are dressed very lightly and asks the protagonist if they are freezing in this temperature. The protagonist assumes that they are used to it. While the student is playing pool, the protagonist sits down next to him on a chair and takes out a cigarette. He lights it on fire and starts smoking it, letting out clouds of tobacco smoke from his mouth each time. While he is smoking, one of the girls approaches him and talks to him. She offers him a drink with her. He points to his friend and says she'd better seduce him since he's still innocent. Taking his advice, she approaches the guy and says she's been told he hasn't tasted the fruit of love yet. He blushes and begins hesitantly mumbling something back to her, unable to put together a coherent sentence. While they are having fun at the establishment, night falls outside and the moon is visible in the sky. They leave the nightclub. The protagonist's friend starts complaining that they only left at 10 o'clock in the evening. The protagonist advises him to hold out until the new year. He starts to say that he's not at all interested in a random girl he met at a nightclub. The hero takes out a cigarette, lights it, and starts smoking. He starts to tell what he was doing on campus but breaks off in the middle of a sentence. A friend starts asking him what he was doing on campus, but the protagonist doesn't answer him in any way. They both notice someone next to him and look in their direction. They are silent together. There are two girls standing there looking surprised and offended. A friend suggests that the protagonist run away from here, but he replies that it is too late to run away as they have been seen. The protagonist thinks that since he and Johnny are not in a relationship, there is nothing wrong with him going to a bar. He smiles and tells her that the party is over, and tells her that her house is in the other direction. She gets angry and says he told her he was going to his grandmother's house. Hearing this, he doesn't know what to say to it. He just stares at Johnny. The other girl says that when they were talking, Johnny mentioned that she could date the main character, but Johnny interrupts her. Johnny, instead of answering, bends down and places the drink she was holding on the ground. She tells her friend to get out of here and they silently start walking away from the guys. The girl starts to say that there's a new drink that Johnny bought for the protagonist at the store recently and accuses him of the places he visits. She yells at him and calls him a scumbag. The protagonist doesn't understand what the big deal is and thinks that he hasn't done anything wrong. A friend of the protagonist suggests that he catch up with the girl. The protagonist feels bad about what has happened. A friend tells him that this is the way to lose a girl. The fruit drink that Johnny left behind is spilled on the ground. A little later, the protagonist decides to call Juno's father. He goes to a payphone and dials his number. The man picks up the phone, and the protagonist says he'd like the phone to be handed to Junea. The heroine's father looks at the door of the girl's room, and she answers nothing and does not respond in any way to the call. He tells the hero that Johnny is already resting, so we'll have to socialize the next day. Hearing the answer, the hero silently puts the receiver back on the payphone. Then he goes back to his room. The next day morning, he starts calling the Juno house again, and the phone is picked up again by the heroine's father. He asks to put the girl on the phone, but her father says she's out of the house, so she can't talk right now. A short time later, he calls the same place again. The heroine's father picks up the phone again. He asks who is calling. Next to him on the couch sits Johnny herself, but she does not pick up her father's phone. The protagonist says he wants to talk to the girl, but is told that she hasn't come home yet, even though that's not true. Hearing the answer, the guy tells the heroine's father to tell her that Chen is coming back the same day. The father whispers to the girl that the protagonist is coming back today. She does not react in any way. She continues to sit sullenly on the couch and ignore all of the guy's attempts to connect. Her father is upset about this. He looks at her, not sure what to say to her in this situation. He asks the girl what was the reason for the quarrel between them, and what happened the day before. She doesn't answer anything and continues to stare at the floor in silence. You can see that she is upset by what is happening. The hero, after hanging up the payphone, starts to walk away from it. Doesn't know what he should do about the relationship. The protagonist's father says that her mother is coming back soon. He thinks she will ask questions if she sees her daughter's condition and mood. Instead of answering, the girl gets up from the couch and says she's going to go to the shower room. Her father looks at her sadly. He wonders what to say to her. Finally asks her a question and asks her if she and Chen are in love with each other. She responds aggressively and sharply that they are not in love, have never been in love, and never will be. Back at home, the main character is packing his things for his trip back to college. He stuffs them into his backpack. His mother complains that not so long ago she was raising her son, but now he is ruthlessly leaving. He replies that he can't do anything about it because he is the headman. She takes 1,000 yuan, holds it out to the protagonist, and tells him to take the money from her. He replies to her that he does not need finances. She asks how this can be the case when his studies have just begun, and he replies that he recently earned 2,500 yuan. The character starts to leave the house and tells his parents to take care of their health and not to fight with each other. His mother stares after him, not knowing what to say. He closes the door behind him. His parents are alone. She asks her husband if they have become old. He wonders why she thought so. She says she feels like her son has his own world now, where he doesn't let his parents in, doesn't take money, and doesn't need them at all. The father thinks this is good as they will worry less about her, but the mother thinks it's wrong. She asked if his husband's co-workers had daughters of suitable age with whom Chen Hanshin could marry. The father recalls the time he met his son and Zhanye together on the street as a couple. He replies to his wife that his co-workers probably have daughters of the right age, still remembering the scene between the guy and the girl. It's raining heavily outside and the sky is covered with storm clouds. The protagonist walks without an umbrella down a flooded street, shielding himself from the moisture with his hand. He thinks about how unfortunate the rain was when he got back from his parents. In the distance, he sees a girl standing in the rain getting wet. He recognizes her. She catches his gaze and notices the protagonist too. She is surprised to see him here. The protagonist starts walking towards the girl. He takes an umbrella out of his backpack as he walks. The girl wonders what he's doing here. She's embarrassed by him and blushes a little. She recalls their last meeting, which was very strange. Remembering the embarrassing situation, she blushes even more. She feels very awkward in his presence. He glares at her, making her feel even more uncomfortable. She is about to leave, but he stops her and tells her to wait. He says he won't eat her and there's no reason to run away from him. She only blushes and mumbles. He's just looking at her. The boyfriend-girlfriend relationship is very awkward. He says he doesn't want to leave her to eat alone and offers to stay and not go. It is raining heavily outside. The main character meets a girl who is hiding from the downpour under an awning. She looks sadly nowhere and he says she can be unafraid of him and stay with him. He says they should help each other when they're in a bad mood, and she asks if he wants to go out to eat. He says that there is a new dish in the canteen. When asked about the price, he says it costs 50 yuan. They decide to walk to the dormitory, and the girl starts encouraging the guy to walk faster. They walk into the rain and she starts to run fast. The guy remains standing still. She disappears from sight, then returns but without an umbrella. She tries not to get wet in the downpour. The hero asks where her umbrella is, to which she replies that she gave it to her neighbor so she wouldn't get wet. He wonders and asks the girl if she doesn't need it herself to keep from getting wet. She tells the protagonist that everything is fine. The protagonist thinks about the fact that this girl is a very simple person. They start walking together. The hero tells her to stay close so she can stay under the umbrella and not get wet. Finally, after a few minutes of walking, they arrive at the dining hall they were headed to. They order shrimp and mutton for 2 people. It costs 53 yuan in total. The girl holds out banknotes to the cashier. They start looking for a place to sit in the hall. The hero asks the girl if she went to the hostel to get money, and she says she did. He gives her a perplexed look, but still doesn't say anything to the girl directly. They sit down at a table and begin to eat their portions with chopsticks in silence. The hero tucks into his order and looks at the girl. They don't speak. He asks if she's hungry when he sees that she's not eating. She just holds the food in her chopsticks and does nothing. Her face darkens and she gets upset when she hears his question. She looks sad. He says that this dish is priced early on the price of lodging and asks if she will eat it. She says she still has 100 yuan saved up. Besides, she will earn a little for sorting books in the library. In addition, she can save money and eat at cafes. He asks if she blames him for spending her money on food. She replies that she doesn't. He watches the girl's reaction curiously but doesn't say anything directly to her. He tells her that in that case she should be his girlfriend. This surprises her immensely. She drops her plate of rice on the table in surprise at the suggestion. He looks at the bowl but doesn't say anything aloud to her. There is an awkward silence between them. He then looks at her but again says nothing. She continues to remain silent as well. She begins to feel embarrassed and blush in front of him. She doesn't know what to say to such a rare proposal. She says she only ate a couple bites of food and asks the protagonist not to force her to eat. He is surprised at her reaction, but agrees and turns the topic of conversation to something else. She looks at the rice scattered across the table. He says he doesn't like forcing people to do things. She recalls her friends convincing her that the protagonist had quickly taken over as headman. They advised her to avoid him if she didn't like him. She looks at the main character but can't find anything to say. She is very embarrassed and shy about what is happening in the dining room. He looks at her with an interested gaze. There was an awkward silence between them again. She says she has to go now. The protagonist agrees that he has already eaten too. He says she should take an umbrella as the canteen is placed close to the hostel. In addition, he tells her to take the leftover food from the canteen home with her. He turns away from her, opens the curtains and looks outside, out the window. She looks at the protagonist uncertainly, but doesn't say anything out loud to him. She then looks down and notices something lying next to her on the table. It turns out to be a white envelope that the protagonist didn't take. She says he didn't take the envelope, but the protagonist has already left the dining room. She picks up the envelope and looks at it, unsure of what she should do with it now. The main character tells teacher Guo that when he was at his parents' house, he took 2 geese with him to cook. The teacher thanks him and says he wants to give him a treat. The protagonist replies that the teacher is too polite. The teacher turns to a little girl who is playing on the floor. He says that Chen Hanshin, her favorite brother, has come. She jumps into his arms and tells him that he has finally arrived. He replies that he came here to see her. She takes his hand and says that she recognizes teacher Xiao Yu's QQ. Teacher Guo doesn't understand what the QQ she's talking about is. The hero thinks about giving something to the girl next time. He says aloud that he wants her to tell everyone about what she has learned after dinner. A woman's voice is heard from the kitchen saying that the food is ready and that dinner can begin. The protagonist turns to teacher Guo and says he will go to the kitchen first. The teacher tells the main character that they have a girl in their group with the name Shen Yu Chu and asks if the guy knows her. The teacher begins to talk about how she has problems in her family and that she has applied for low-income assistance. But the application has not yet been vetted. He asks the protagonist if he can look into the matter. The hero didn't reply anything to the teacher and only made a surprised expression on his face. The teacher asked if the headman had any questions and the protagonist replied that there were no questions. Next, the events unfold on October 8th in the university building. It is daytime outside. He sits together with his friends in their couples classes. John complains that it's hard to come back from vacation. The hero says he is tired too. In the auditorium, a girl approaches him and tells him to come out of his office and talk to her. She takes him away from the other students so that their conversation can't be heard by anyone. She pulls a white envelope out of her pocket and shows the protagonist. She grudgingly asks what it means. The protagonist looks at the envelope and thinks about how the letter assigned to Shen Yuchu ended up in her possession. He says you shouldn't discuss such things here as the students might misunderstand things. The girl tells him that he is horrible. She then said that Shen Yuchu had asked her to return this letter to the protagonist. He asked if Shen Yuchu had opened the envelope and looked at its contents. The girl says she didn't open the door for Shen Yuchu, but she did. The hero asks what is needed from him in that case. The girl says he doesn't need to pursue Shen. She says there are many other girls, such as his classmates. Hearing this, the headman asks if he has done any harm to Shen Yuichu. The girl says that he gave her 500 yuan, and it might offend her if she opened the envelope. He replies that it was just his kindness. The hero raises his hand and says that at least he doesn't want to hurt her in any way. The girl doesn't believe his words. She asks skeptically if it's really true. She says that since the guys and girls of the group trust him, the guy should behave decently. The protagonist says she's too ignorant, lights a cigarette and starts smoking. The girl turns away from the tobacco smoke. The boy tells her that Hu is not in love with anyone. The hero tells the girl that he could introduce her to his acquaintance. He praises him in every possible way, saying that he is kind and polite. She is angry with him and is about to leave. But halfway there, she turns around and looks at him. She says girls feel disconnected from guys. They often feel they need to get close to guys. The hero thinks about the fact that this is a good suggestion. This way, the team will become more friendly, and he will be able to communicate with Shen Yuchu more often. He asks what his interlocutor is thinking. She says that we could meet as a group and eat somewhere. The hero says it's too old-fashioned. He thinks everyone should be united in some way. The girl asks if he has thought of something. He replies that he will tell her when he gets back to the hostel. She turns around and says she's leaving. He stops her and tells her to wait some more. He puts out his cigarette and says there's another matter he wants to discuss with her. She asks what the question is. He doesn't answer her right away and is silent for a second. He says she applied for financial support for Shen Yuchu, but did not say when the problems with the application's approval came up. She stammers. He says that they had already agreed that she should come to him when there are problems she can't solve. He says she has self-motivation and a sense of dignity, but sometimes they need to be transcended. She says she can deal with it and says she's going to go to the committee again to try to formalize the aid. He says he's going to go with her to deal with the situation. She agrees. She is awkwardly silent, but doesn't say anything else to Chen Hansheng. She then meets with Shen Yuchu and tells him that the teacher told everything to the headman, and now he will go deal with the problem. She feels awkward about it and can't find anything to say. Then she notices a man in the doorway. It turns out to be the main character. He stares at her confidently, making her even more confused. She rests her head on the desk and hides her face. She blushes heavily in Chen Hansheng's presence, and she doesn't want him to see it. The action unfolds in the teacher's office at the main character's university. He comes there with two girls. One of them greets the teacher. Shen Yuchu is shy and hides behind her friend's back. The main character looks at the teacher's face and recognizes him. It's Yu Yueping. The teacher tells the girls that they have come in vain as they still have to wait for the application to be approved. He says that the data submitted is insufficient. The girl asks how long the whole process will take. He replies that he doesn't know, and that they will let him know when it is ready. The girl gets angry and says that she sent in the paperwork before the vacation even started and asks why nothing is still ready. He says they have certain financial rules and that they need to understand these things. All three stand and look at the teacher. He is silent and defiantly does not look at them. The girl thinks about not underestimating Chen Hansheng and that he will be able to solve the problem. The girl tells the teacher that he should understand Shen Yuchu's situation and that she is constantly saving money on food. She says Shen Yuchu is always working late at the library and that she was going to take a second job in the cafeteria in order to afford food. She gets mad at him and says they should consider such things regarding students. The teacher continues to remain silent and pays no attention to the infuriated girl's words. Seeing that she gets no reaction to her words, she gets even angrier and barely restrains herself. She can't stand it and hits the table with force. She asks what kind of teacher he is. Finally, the teacher opens a shelf in the desk and pulls out a small item from there. He gives them the seal and tells them that the students are now solely responsible for this situation. Hu grabs her from the table. The protagonist tries to calm her down, but she tells him not to stop her from helping Shen Yuchu. The hero tells the teacher that it's time for them all to calm down a bit and get a grip. They drag the angry girl out of the room, ignoring her protests. They go outside in front of the building. Chen Hansheng asks if she has calmed down yet. She complains that although Shen Yuchu fulfilled all the conditions, she never got help. Shen herself says they don't need to go there anymore. She assures her that everything is fine and that she can manage without financial support for the students. The main character sits on the steps of a building and sighs loudly. He turns to the girls. He asks that they give him the documents Shen Yuchu needs. They ask if he will be able to get help for her. He doesn't know if the venture will succeed, but he thinks it's worth at least trying. The girl thinks that nothing will come of it, as the teacher doesn't even want to try to understand the student's situation. The hero thinks of another problem, that Hu doesn't know how to behave, but he doesn't say it out loud. He gets up from the steps and walks back into the building, back to the teacher's office. He gives his name and apologizes for the girl's behavior and says she didn't understand the situation. Secretary Yu agrees with him, but other than that doesn't say anything. The hero notices something nearby in the study and turns his attention to it. He walks over to the secretary's closet and starts cleaning and putting things in order there. The secretary observes this but says nothing. The hero puts the books back in their places and puts them neatly on the shelf. He then picks up a broom and begins to sweep up the dust and debris on the office floor. The secretary wants to stop him, but Chen Hansheng only smiles politely at him. Then he takes a mop and starts wiping the floor. The secretary is silently working all this time. Then he makes hot coffee for the secretary while he fills out papers on his desk. In the time the hero is doing this, the entire morning passes and noon comes. The secretary rises from her desk and says she's going to go eat on her break. The protagonist agrees and walks out of the office into the hallway with him. After a small amount of time, the hero returns to the secretary's office again. He greets him. The secretary asks him if he has any classes at the university right now. He says they don't have any couples right now. The secretary says he cleaned up well and can now go back to the dormitory. The hero replies that he has only mopped the floor and has not had time to clean the secretary's closet. The secretary thinks about the fact that it all depends on how much time the hero spends in his attempts to get help for Shen Yuchu. Evening comes, it's 6:30 on the clock. The protagonist and the secretary are still in the office. The secretary tells the character that he has already cleaned the floor in the closet, and now it's okay not to come back the next day. The protagonist says that he's not done yet, and that he's only cleaned the outside of the closet, but hasn't cleaned the inside yet. The next morning, the protagonist continues to clean the secretary's office. They do not communicate. On the third day, the situation is repeated. Again, they do not speak to each other. On the fourth day, the guy still continues cleaning in the same way. Finally, the secretary turns to him. He walks up to the guy and asks him his name. The hero himself is wiping down the closet at the same time. He introduces himself and says that he is the head of his group. The secretary offers him a cigarette and he accepts. The guy lights the secretary's cigarette. They start smoking together. They are silent, standing next to each other and only letting out clouds of tobacco smoke. The secretary asks if things are really that financially bad at Shen Yuchu's place. The character replies that her parents died early and that she lived with her grandmother, who is no longer capable of earning money. He says that Shen Yuchu saves as much as possible on food and that she only spends 50 yuan in a month. The secretary listens to the guy and puts out his cigarette in the ashtray. He says he understands the girl's situation now. The protagonist is still smoking and doesn't answer anything. Next, the events unfold in the office of Yu's secretary. The protagonist brings him breakfast and the secretary says he shouldn't have. The guy tells the secretary that he's here seeing documents that might encourage students to start businesses. The secretary responds that the university actually has rather few resources for such a thing, and all they can do for students is vacate offices. The secretary says people are now starting businesses to get publicity. Then the secretary remembers something and starts looking in her desk shelf for something for the protagonist. He pulls out the paperwork and says the main character doesn't need to come in tomorrow, and tells the girl to fill out the paperwork. The guy takes the documents for Shen Yuchu from the secretary's hands and is surprised at the favor done. The secretary says he spoke to the teacher and he confirmed the girl's financial situation. He says that the documents should be submitted next week. The hero asks if the documents from Shen Yuchu City are needed. The secretary replies that it's not too important. The guy starts to read the paperwork quite a bit. It's a registration application for financial aid for low-income students. The protagonist is pleased that he was right and was able to help the girl. Further events unfold in the office, where students and friends of the protagonist have gathered. They brag about which of them helped him this week. All three have helped him recently. The protagonist agrees that their help is crucial for him. The students support him. Then he says they need to organize events for the guys and girls of the group. The students love the idea and are excited about the opportunity to work on this project. Hero says that Hu suggested going out to eat and sing. The students think it's a good idea. The protagonist says that he did not approve of this option, and the students are puzzled and ask him why. He argues that they are too young for such activities and entertainment. Hearing this, the guys ask if the main character has a better idea. He suggests going to the student activity center and purchasing 54 movie theater tickets. One of his students dreams of being seated next to Shang Ayan, another student in a movie theater. He complains that he has run out of cigarettes and that he can't think straight without them. One of his friends offers to buy them for him. He starts to leave, but the main character stops him and says he'll buy cigarettes that are too light. That one says to Chen Hanshin not to worry, and that he will buy suitable ones for him. The protagonist then approaches Shen Yuchu, who is sitting at a table reading something in a book. She notices him, but is too shy of him to say anything to him or say hello. He asks if she missed him while he was away the previous few days. She doesn't respond to that. He says he needs help catching up on his studies because he's been away for a couple of days. He asks if she heard him. She timidly and uncertainly tells him that she did. Then a girl enters the office and starts yelling at the protagonist and tells him not to hit on Shen Yuichu. He says it's right on time. He has a form to help low-income students and needs help filling it out. The girl is delighted when she sees the document. She is surprised that the secretary helped the protagonist to get the application approved after all. Shen Yuchu hesitantly thanks the protagonist for the favor. He says that when they have time, they should sleep together. She gets angry and embarrassed in response. When the girl filled out the application, she asks the protagonist when the finances will arrive. He says that there is no way to know yet. The hero says that in order to bring the team together, it is necessary to arrange to watch movies together. He says he plans to buy 54 tickets at the Youth Activity Center. He also mentions that the girls and boys will draw lots to determine who sits with whom. He says that such a method will be able to break people into small groups and bring them together. In addition, he suggests that it could lead to the beginnings of romantic relationships. He says if the others don't have any objections regarding the plan, then that's the way he'll do it. He starts to walk away and the girl looks at him perplexed. She says nothing in response to the proposal. Then he turns around and says that since this is a group event, no one is allowed to skip it. Shen Yuchu is worried, but her friend says she should go since he helped her get financial aid. She advises her to scream in case a guy starts hitting on her or behaving inappropriately. In front of the group, the protagonist announces that in order to bring the team together, it is necessary to organize a joint viewing of films and schedules it for the evening of the same day. He points to the box of lots. He says that all the seats will be drawn randomly between guys and girls. The girls like the idea. They say they haven't done this for a long time and it is sure to be an interesting event. Students line up in front of the lots they begin to take one at a time out of the box. Some loudly announce their results. While the other students are murmuring and discussing the fallout, Shen Yuchu looks at his piece of paper. There she sees the number 707. She remembers what the protagonist didn't warn her about. He said he would have number 706, and that they would sit together so there was no need to draw lots. One of the teachers looks out the window and sees guys approaching the girls and starting to talk to them. One of the female students approaches the head teacher. She asks him a question and asks him which seat he has been assigned. He replies that it would be more interesting if they found out about it after they were in the theater. She doesn't like that answer. She reaches for the protagonist's piece of paper and tells him to let her see the sequence number. She sees that the number 707 is written on the main character's paper. She stares at the sheet for a second. She gets upset when she sees his number. She tells him to forget it and go to the movie theater. The hero doesn't say anything back. He stares after her and holds his sheet in his hands, unsure of how he should handle the situation. Guys come to the event dressed up with various accessories and jewelry. One of them pores over a few bracelets and the other chooses to wear a chain around his neck. One of them asks if the main character likes his hair. He thinks about the fact that it is my student who lacks a costume to appear mature. The protagonist asks the assembled students if they are ready. They respond positively. After that, they all gather and start walking out of the university building together. The doors of the building open, and students from the protagonist's group start coming out of there. The girls who have dressed up in dresses for the event come out first. The main character notices that guys don't talk to girls, but thinks that after watching the movie, a few couples might come along. He looks at the door. He thinks about the reason why Shen Yuchu still hasn't come. Finally, she arrives. She approaches the hero and apologizes for keeping him waiting. She excuses herself and, stammering a little, says that she had been studying for a long time. She is out of breath and tired. He turns around and starts walking. She apologizes to him again and starts to follow him. He asks if she is hungry or thirsty. She answers both questions in the negative. The hero says that the movie is long and she might get hungry. She hesitantly replies that she doesn't know if she wants anything. He tells her to go ahead and he will catch up with her a little later. She stands alone at the entrance to the movie theater waiting for the main character to finally arrive. She wonders if he is angry with her. She is lonely and has a look of sadness on her face. The main character comes up behind her with a bag of popcorn. He tells her to go forward instead of standing still. Suddenly, she trips awkwardly over something and starts flying to the ground. She gets scared and screams, but the main character catches her in flight and holds her in his arms to keep her from falling. She looks at him and blushes profusely at the awkwardness of the situation. He holds her in one hand and a bag of popcorn in the other. He tells her in her ear to walk more carefully, and she continues to shy and blush at his words. Finally, he takes her hand and leads her behind him. He tells her to follow him. A few dozen students are sitting in the theater room watching a movie on the big screen. The main character thinks about the fact that he already knows the plot of this movie, but wants to pretend like it's unknown to him. The guy is watching Shen Yuchu. She stares spellbound at the movie screen, oblivious to the protagonist's behavior. He notes that she has a very thin wrist and that she doesn't eat meat at all. He thinks that financial help would be very helpful to her. She notices his gaze on her and looks in his direction. She's shy again and blushes every time she makes contact with the guy. Chen Hanshin reaches into the bag of popcorn, but takes the girl's hand instead of the food from there. She starts to blush even more from the awkward situation. The protagonist pretends as if he doesn't care. He asks her to be quiet as the most interesting part of the movie is about to start. She looks at him and isn't sure what the right thing for her to do in this situation is. She ends up saying nothing and continues to hold his hand in hers without stopping to look embarrassed. When the movie is over, it's already nighttime outside. The hero asks if the girl liked the movie tonight. She says she liked it, but that it was too long. The protagonist says it didn't seem that long to him. He invites her to go to the movie theater again a little later. She is embarrassed and can't find anything to say to this proposal. He asks if her silence can be taken as consent. The girl gets nervous and says that is not what she meant. He says nothing and stares intently straight into the heroine's eyes. Shen Yuchu also looks at the hero, not knowing what to say to her. Tension builds up between them. Chen Hanshin opens his mouth and is about to say something to the girl, but he is suddenly interrupted. An athlete running by slightly elbows the protagonist in the back. From that point, he flies straight at Shen Yuichu. She startles when he gets very close and opens her eyes wide in surprise. The push caused him to touch Shen Yuichu's face with his lips, resulting in an awkward situation that resembled a kiss. The athlete runs on and apologizes for pushing the protagonist while the guy and girl stand in a stupor. The guy starts to apologize to Shen Yuichu, but she is unable to listen to him and she starts to panic. She gets very frightened by what's happening and without thinking, pushes the protagonist. With a jolt, he starts flying straight into a body of water in the park. She yells at him. The athlete looks at the situation with surprise. The hero fails to keep his balance and with a loud splash, Chen Hanshin falls into the water. Then he comes out of the water and says she almost killed him. The sportsman comes up to them and asks if they're okay, and thinks the guy and girl are arguing with each other. The hero says the girl has great reactions and extends her hand to help him out of the water. She agrees and pulls the drenched guy out of the pond. She starts to awkwardly apologize. He tells her to go on without him because he needs to go back to the dormitory and change into dry clothes. The character complains that although the plan with the movie succeeded, this carelessness led to an awkward situation. He walks away from the girl, sneezing from the cold and wet on the way. She looks away from him. With the headman out of sight, the girl is left alone with her thoughts. She finds the situation amusing and laughs a little at the embarrassment between them. The protagonist returns to the team in the dormitory. In the dormitory, the protagonist is approached by one of the students. He begins to complain about how miserable his life is. The headman asks if his life is even more miserable than the main character's. He then notices that the main character is wet and asks what happened. He says that he accidentally fell into the lake and that it was nothing special. A student tells about how the girl he was supposed to sit with changed her ticket. Because of this, he had to sit with his aunt. The other students find it amusing, but the guy cries nonetheless because of what happened. The protagonist calms him down a bit. A student continues to be sad about being rejected by his girlfriend. He says it would have been better if she had just ignored him and not given him false hope. He cries and sings sad love songs in the room in front of the other students. Why is someone throwing a pillow at him? The students complain that he keeps anyone awake with his singing. The protagonist accuses the student of giving up and says that he wanted to call him to play a shooter, but now he won't. Another student sides with the guy and says that he needs to be given a chance to talk. He remembers about a girl who had recently had a bad experience with unhappy love. This girl was from a neighboring university and lived on the 3rd floor. The hero once again asks for the address. He's told that the girl had only a few minor injuries. He recalls his fight with the girl a few days before. He thinks it could be the same girl and is going to visit her. He starts to pack up and leave the room. The neighbors tell him it's too late to go out. He runs barefoot out of the dorm room. They shout after him that he forgot to put on his socks. He goes to the right building and says he's looking for John Ye of the 303 group. The janitor asks what his name is. He goes by the name of the girl's father. The janitor calls Juneja and tells her that her father wants to meet her and that he is here to see her. She comes downstairs from my room and walks outside to the main character in her house clothes. She thinks about why her father would want to find her at this time of night. Then she hears a voice, turns around and notices the main character. He tells her not to look out. He says he only gave her father's name so she would come down to talk to him. She calls him a scoundrel, turns around and is about to walk back out. He tries to talk some sense into her and tells her to talk it over calmly. She replies that he should talk to the girls at the bar. He says she can leave, but then he'll come tomorrow with a big poster and put it up at the bottom of her dorm. He says he will pretend to be the father of her children and says he can take care of the kids. The heroine blushes and gets angry at him for such an offer. She sighs and reluctantly agrees to talk to him and remains standing outside. He says he called her many times, but she didn't pick up the phone, and because of that, he couldn't explain to her what happened the night of their fight. He says that Zibo had an argument with his mother that day and asked to go for a walk with him. She asks if Zibo called him to that bar. She can hardly believe it and is skeptical. The protagonist says that it was a mistake to agree to the offer and that he now realizes that he should have turned it down. She asks what he was doing at the nightclub. He says he was just playing pool with Zibo and the two of them. He says that if she doesn't believe it, she can call Zibo and ask him herself. Hearing this explanation, she silently stares at Chen Hansheng for a while. Then she turns away from him but remains standing still. The hero doesn't understand what this reaction is. She stands like that for a few seconds. Both the guy and the girl are silent. There is an awkward silence between them. She tells him to go to the library with her at 8:30 tomorrow morning without being late. Without giving him anything to answer, she turns around and runs back to her college dormitory. The protagonist stares after her in bewilderment, not realizing what just happened in the first place. The events then unfold in the library the next day at 8:30 in the morning, where the protagonist has arrived. He stands at the entrance, wondering why he had to make an appointment at such an early morning time. Nearby, he sees guys holding packages of food. He ponders the fact that they have come to give breakfast to their girlfriends. The doors open, and 3 girls come out of the library. One of them is Janier, and the other 2 are unknown to the hero. The girl looks at the main character. He thinks about how he is now like those guys who brought their girls food. Then the guys who were nearby waiting with the food all run up to Juneya together. They start handing her packs of food. One of them bought an egg, another bought rolls, and the third bought a full breakfast. Janier thanks, but politely declines the food offered. One of the guys leaves a packet of food nearby. He's upset by Janier's rejection. He says that even though she rejects him, they might have something going one day, but in the middle of a sentence, he gets cut off. The main character picks up the food left by the guy and starts eating. The guy yells at him. The guy doesn't understand if it's okay to do that. The protagonist still continues to eat, ignoring the protests. Then he asks if the guy wants to buy him a drink with his meal as well. Junier starts pulling him away from the poor guy. He protests and wants to eat some more. Junier's 3 fans stare after her, upset after seeing her boyfriend. After a short time, Jonier and the protagonist approach the entrance to the library together. She asks the headman if he's curious about who the guys in front were. He asks who they were. The girl thinks the question was asked insincerely and does not want to answer it. She gives him the bag and says she'll look for the book and he can find a place for now. He sits down at a vacant table in the library and starts waiting for the girl. He is bored as he sits by himself. She returns with the books and says she picked up books for him in his specialty. He replies that he is more interested in law books. She asks why he needs such books if he is not studying this discipline. He replies that students often start their own businesses, and knowledge of the law can help them a lot. Then he says he doesn't really want to read it, and would rather ask a pretty girl from the appropriate department to read those books to him. The girl snorts. Then they sit in silence for a while she studies the literature. He notices a guy in the distance watching them from across the room. He asks if she reads books in her specialty. She replies that she reads books in his specialty. He notes that she is often asked for help, and she agrees. He changes the subject and starts talking about how she's been covering for him since this morning. She says yes, that's what she did. She puts the book down and looks at the main character. He looks back at her but doesn't say anything. He starts to rise from the table. He says he wants to make sure no one else bothers her. She doesn't know what he's talking about. He puts his hand on the table and approaches the girl, who doesn't know how to respond. He leans over and kisses her on the lips. She is shocked by this and does nothing in return. She blushes very deeply with embarrassment and shame, but doesn't pull out of the kiss. The action takes place later in the protagonist's room. He spits blood into the sink of the wash basin. He looks at himself in the mirror and notices that the girl almost bit his lip off. He remembers the kiss and thinks about the fact that for the girl, it was her first kiss and that's why she was angry. A neighbor asks him if he broke his lip. He replies that he just bit it and that there is nothing to worry about. The neighbor tells him to be careful. He also adds that Tao's teacher's test is coming up so that the protagonist doesn't forget. The protagonist hears the bell ring and walks off the balcony, saying that a girl is probably looking for him right now. He walks into the room and picks up the phone. He greets Junier after he hears that it is she who is calling. She asks him about the state of his mouth. She worries about whether she bit his lip. The protagonist notices that his neighbor, who is sitting next to him, overhears his dialogue with a girl. He listens as they discuss their trip to the doctor's office together. The hero says he doesn't have much time. The neighbor is jealous of their relationship and ponders whether the headman has a beautiful girlfriend. Next, the action unfolds in the university auditorium. Someone is calling Shen Yuchu. A joyful girl looks at her and tells her that her application for financial aid for low-income students has been approved. Shen Yuchu thanks her and is happy to hear the news. She feels much more comfortable with her friend than with guys. The girl says that Chen Hansheng can be relied on, and Shen Yuchu's girlfriend agrees. Guys enter the room, including the main character. The girls notice them. He enters and turns his attention to Shen Yuichu and her friend as well. She recalls the previous situation, embarrassed, and begins to blush, averting her gaze from the headman. She recalls the awkward situation when they touched each other near the lake in the park. The protagonist asks if her application for financial aid for low-income students has been approved. He then walks over and puts his elbow on her shoulder. The friend asks why he is doing this. The protagonist replies that he is just saying hello. Hero says that he had a lot of credit for approving the application, but that Hu did her best too. Hu snorts when she hears that. He says that even though they have already solved this problem, you should still thank Secretary Yu. He leans towards Shen Yuchu, but his girlfriend deflects him aside. She asks how he wants to thank the secretary. He suggests giving gifts of essentials, along the lines of folders. He says that the girl should also contribute to the gift. She asks what needs to be bought. He offers to bring dishes from his native land instead of buying them. A friend says Shen Yuchu eats dried peppers all the time and suggests giving the secretary chili peppers. The girl said Shen Yuchu found wild vegetables near the dormitory and watered them daily. Shen Yuchu blushes even more red and embarrassed after hearing this. There is an awkward silence. The boyfriend asks why it was a good idea to say it. The friend says she thought it was a good idea to say it. Guy suggests peeling vegetables and peppers and giving them to the secretary as a small gesture of thanks. He says he doesn't know what chili peppers taste like, but half the group has never eaten one either. Shen Yuchu is surprised and asks if most people have really never tried chili peppers. 2 days later, the protagonist and his friends are walking down the street and chatting. One of the students complains that his game has not been saved. A girl comes in, she's upset and starts complaining to the main character. He thinks she's here waiting for someone, but she says Shen Yuchu is crying for some reason. He is surprised and asks the girl the reason for Shen Yuchu's behavior. She begins to tell a story. When the main character offered to give her a gift of chili peppers, she went to the vegetable garden. There, while she was working and picking vegetables, she was bitten by insects and left nasty red spots on her skin. She decided to leave the peppers on the balcony in order that the strong odor would not disturb the girls in her room. And then in the morning, this pepper was brought into the classroom. The protagonist asks what happened next. None of the students wanted to try the peppers and complained about the unpleasant flavor of the vegetable. One of the main character's friends said he had already had breakfast and didn't want to risk eating such a thing. The hero thinks about Shen Yuchu bursting into tears over something like this. He looks at the girl who is sitting alone in the corner of the auditorium. She doesn't say anything and just looks down. None of the students are near her. She also scratches her arm that has been bitten by insects while working in the vegetable garden. A teacher enters the room and tells everyone to take their seats and is about to start class. The protagonist says he has to delay the couple's start a bit. He stands in front of the audience and prepares to address the group. There are dozens of eyes on him. Shen Yuchu, still upset, looks at him with an unsure look. The protagonist walks over to a plate of chili peppers and opens it. He looks inside the bowl for a couple of seconds and says nothing. All the students watch his actions carefully. He takes one pepper from the plate with his hands and puts it in his mouth and starts chewing. Shen Yuchu looks at him as he eats it. Her face shows surprise at the headman's action. The main character continues to chew the vegetables with a loud crunch. Then he says that they are very tasty. He holds out a bowl and offers Ian a taste of them, to which the boy agrees. The students begin to eat the peppers. They comment favorably on their flavor and say that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. The other students come over and start eating them along with the rest of the students. Shen Yuchu blushes as he looks at what is happening. She continues to look at the head teacher and the rest of the students who are gorging on food and slowly gets over being upset. The students say that such a delicious dish could be sold. The others agree with this. They beckon the girls over and tell them it's a rare opportunity to try something unusual. Shen Yuchu starts crying, but this time from happiness. She wipes her tears with her hand while the students eat her vegetables. A guy along with a girl were riding on a bus. They were sitting in the back seat. The girl wondered to herself if this was her first date. It seemed to the girl that things were supposed to go differently and more romantically. Between the guy and the girl sat a little girl. She was busy drawing. The boy's companion thought she'd imagined it all wrong. The little girl's name was Jia Hui. She had finished drawing and wanted to show the drawing to the girl. The girl asked Jia Hui what she had drawn. The girl replied that she had drawn Teacher Xiao Yu. After that, Jia Hui held out her drawing to the guy. She wanted him to look at it too. The girl grabbed the guy's ear and gave him Teacher Xiao Yu's name. At this time, the bus stopped at the postal center. The protagonist thought he was afraid of both the little girl and his companion. He decided he had to get out quickly. Chen, accompanied by his companions, walked around the city. Around there were a lot of people. The girl interrupted the long silence and said there were a lot of people here this weekend. Chen said that if there were many people, there was no need to stand. He hurried his companion. The girl replied that they should eat first and then think about what to do next. On the way, they came across a fast food store. A girl suggested they go in because there might be ice cream there. Chen replied that there were a lot of people in line. After that, the girl and little Jia Hui asked the guy to treat them to ice cream. The protagonist agreed to the companion's demands and said they convinced him. The guy treated the girl and Jia Hui to ice cream and the two of them were very happy. Chen walked behind and watched his companions. He thought to himself that they were the same, the adult and the little one. After that, they all went into a clothing store. The girl was looking for a suitable outfit for Jia Hui. The girl then picked out her clothes and asked the saleswoman about the price. Chen thought sadly to himself that it is very boring to go shopping with girls. The main character asked the girl what they had decided to buy. She said that she had found one thing but didn't know if she could wear it in November. The saleswoman asked the customer if she needed winter clothing. She offered to show her winter options. Then the saleswoman offered the guy a jacket with a new design. She said it would suit his girlfriend well. After these words, the girl became very shy. She became silent. The girl told the protagonist that the down jacket is available in male and female versions and offered him to buy. The guy replied that he does not need a down jacket. Afterward, the saleswoman said the down jacket would be a great item for the couple. Chen replied meekly that in that case he would buy himself a down jacket too. After that, the guy and the girl discussed with the saleswoman the color of the down jacket. The girl stepped back to try on the clothes. The saleswoman told the guy that he and his companion were very right to come to buy down jackets. It happens that in November, the temperature drops below 0. Chen remembered how there was a severe cold snap in the first year. Because of this, half of the people in the group got sick. The guy wondered how the girl had managed to survive the cold snap and whether it would make a difference. The protagonist asked the saleswoman if the clothes could be shipped. She demanded payment in advance. Chen said he wanted to buy 2 jackets at once. The saleswoman asked if he wanted to surprise his girlfriend with the purchase. After a little thought, the guy hesitantly confirmed the saleswoman's words. Chen told the saleswoman to go get a pen and paper, and he would give her the address. At this time, the girl came out of the dressing room and approached the protagonist. The guy was very surprised. He noticed that the girl became very beautiful in a new down jacket. The girlfriend asked the guy with interest what he thought of her new jacket. After a short pause, Chen told the girl that she looked very beautiful. Then the boy and girl discussed about trying on 3 more things. Jiahui listened to them and decided that the adult world was very complicated. The next day, the letter carrier brought a parcel to the girl, Tseng Yuchu. She thanked him. The girl read the address and noticed that the package was sent from John Yu's store. She didn't understand who could have sent it. Yuchu opened the package and noticed that inside it was a new down jacket. Also in the package was a note from the main character. He wrote to his girlfriend that in 2 days there will be cold weather and she needs a down jacket. The girl stood still for a long time holding her down jacket in her hand and reading the note. Yuichu was very pleased to receive such a nice gift from the main character. The girl clutched the down jacket to herself. She imagined how warm she would be walking in it. The main character walked up to a big white building. He decided to try and get a job. Chen thought that he needed to establish a good relationship with Secretary Yu and get support. After a brief pause, the guy finished his cigarette and decided to go inside. Walking past the entrance, the guy thought that he had been preparing for a whole month and now it was time to act. At this time, Yuichu's girlfriend entered the clothing store. She saw that the down jacket cost 318 yuan. The girl thought she was spending that kind of money in 6 months. Oh, the guy just took and gave her a down jacket. A saleswoman came up and asked the girl what she wanted to buy. Yuichu asked the sales clerk if they had wool for knitting scarves and gloves. The sales clerk asked her to follow her. The saleswoman then noticed that the girl was wearing a down jacket from the same store. The saleswoman told the customer that the down jacket suits the girl very well, and such clothes sell well. Then the saleswoman asked the customer what color wool she wanted. If you're knitting something for a girl, you need orange. For a guy, white would be fine. Then the saleswoman put all of the girl's purchases into a bag and said it would be 15 yuan for everything. The customer took the bag in her hands. She wanted to say something to the saleswoman, but did not dare. The saleswoman noticed some timidity and indecision in the girl. The saleswoman looked at the customer carefully and asked if she needed anything else. The girl asked the saleswoman if they needed staff in the store. The employee replied that they did not have any part-time jobs. The customer then turned around and apologized for the inconvenience. The customer, almost unable to see anything in front of her, ran out of the store with a bag. As Yuichu was leaving the store, another girl walked past her. The girl didn't go into the store. She stopped. She was attracted to Yuichu by something. After that, the girl took a long and attentive look after the departing Yuichu. The girl was especially attracted to the blue down jacket that the outgoing customer was wearing. A saleswoman came in and asked a customer who had come in how she could help her. The girl said that she had bought a down jacket the other day, but it was defective. She asked if it could be exchanged. The saleswoman asked her to show the receipt. The main character at that time came to get a job and showed the paper with his calculations to the manager. The manager carefully analyzed the document and asked the guy if he had done it all himself. Chen replied that he had prepared it all by himself for a month and researched the delivery situation at the university. The guy reported that the current agent is picking up 70 packs. There are 6,000 students on the university campus, 70, and there are not enough packs. Then the manager smoked and said that 70 packs wasn't so little. The guy has read all the documents that relate to support. The university can offer several facades with convenient transportation interchange. Chen added that Kaiyuan will extend its influence to other universities. The protagonist asked Director Jun how interested he was in the documents. The principal replied with interest to the guy that this was the first time he had seen a student like this. The man added that he was interested in the information he had read. Chen asked the director what decision he had made. Director Zhang told the guy that he would be his agent now. He asked him to realize the supplies in Kaiwan. The man asked the guy to sign the contract. He's going to go to the university to check it out. The protagonist got excited and said he would have no problem doing whatever he was asked to do. Most of all, the guy was excited as he received a cell phone from his employer. Chen took the phone in his hands and hesitated as he decided who he would call now. The boy called his mother and gave her a new phone number. The mother asked her son where he got the money for the purchase. The boy hung up. The man asked the woman who had just called them. The woman replied that her son had called and said that he had bought a new phone but did not say where he had gotten the money for it. The woman hung up the phone and thought about it. She didn't understand how a guy could have money. Chen said to himself that only his mother could talk to him like that. The main character called his girlfriend. She was just at the store. The guy told the girl that he bought a cell phone and asked her to write down the number. The girlfriend asked the guy if he called her first after buying the phone. Chen replied that he hadn't even called his mother yet. The guy wanted to hang up, but his girlfriend interrupted him. She said she had seen an interesting girl recently. The girlfriend reported that the girl was wearing the same down jacket that she and her boyfriend had bought recently. The protagonist got worried. The guy asked his girlfriend if the girl in the down jacket was pretty. The girlfriend reported that the girl in the down jacket had her head down but looked good. Chen said that down jackets are popular now and he hung up the phone. The protagonist turned off his phone. He realized he was in serious trouble. The guy thought it would be really bad if the girls wore the same outfits. The protagonist thought strongly to himself that he couldn't let that happen. The main character was sitting in a computer science class. The teacher was talking about the history of computers. At this time, the students were completely absorbed in computer games. A friend suggested that Chen join the game. The guy replied that they themselves were enough for the game. The protagonist decided to log into the messenger under his nickname and see the new messages. Chen started up the messenger and looked at the various nicknames of his friends. The protagonist decided to check out the details of his friends on Messenger. Chen read the information in the messenger and was surprised that there was harassment even now. Guy was particularly interested in a user under the nickname Tangled Love. Unexpectedly, the protagonist is distracted by a phone call from his computer work. Chen picked up the phone and asked his mother in a whisper why she was calling him. Mom informed her son angrily that Auntie's cousin had texted the guy a couple of questions on Messenger and asked what he said to her there. Chen replied to his mother that it was all a mistake. He wanted to justify himself. The mother shouted to her son that he was being very impertinent and she went to him. The boy was upset. He didn't understand why his mother decided to come to him right away. A user with the nickname Clearly Not Lighthearted offered a guy to play with him over the weekend. The protagonist replied to the user that he has no time and is always busy. Then the guy wanted to be contacted by Xiao Rongye's girlfriend. The protagonist decided to turn on invisible mode in Messenger. Xiao Junye texted her boyfriend that she wanted to go shopping with him tonight. The guy replied to the girl that he was busy with freshman initiation. The girl told him that she would come back on the weekend, but now she was busy preparing. The guy stared at the message for a long time and had a hard time believing the girl was coming. The protagonist thought it would be a great misfortune for him if both of his girlfriends met. The guy decided to himself that something might happen to Xiao Rongye's girlfriend. Chen wrote a messenger message to his friends and said that there were a lot of girls around and there was something to drink. The boy read further messages from his friends. He decided he needed to call some of his classmates. Chen was absorbed and assured himself that nothing bad would happen. The main character looked away and noticed one girl in the class. He looked at his girlfriend and noticed she wasn't doing anything with the computer. The guy noticed that the girl hadn't even turned on her computer. Chen imagined how lonely the girl was now. He thought that she was not having a good time. The guy got up from his seat and walked over to his student acquaintance. Chen asked the girl by the computer if she had a messenger. The main character told the girl that he would help her with her computer skills. The student picked up the mouse and began to show the girl how the programs worked. The student was looking very intently at the computer monitor. She was curious. The guy standing behind the girl was showing her the ins and outs of the computer. Chen watched his girlfriend's reaction. She was shy and felt awkward. The guy told the girl that Messenger requires an account number and password. The girl thought for a long time. She decided what she would choose as her password. The student said the password would be her birthday. The guy offered her an easier password. The protagonist explained to the girl that she should not change her password in the future, as it could deprive her of access to the account. After that, the guy had a long chat with the girl, helping her register an account. The guy helped the girl to create an account in Messenger as an avatar. He put a picture of a cat. Chen told the girl that he would add her as a friend and they could send each other messages. At this time, the main character's parents were conferring, sitting in their home. The wife told the husband that their son was doing something incomprehensible at university. and how he could have a cell phone. The husband said that the boy was already 18 years old and should not worry. The woman got angry and told her husband that he didn't even realize the extent of the problem. The mother pondered and imagined how a guy could go to different meetings receiving gifts. The woman then confidently said she was going to the boyfriend's house for the weekend. At this time, the main character's girlfriend is wearing a pink down jacket while humming a song. The girl thought happily to herself that she would meet Chen. The main character asked the student if she understood how to use Messenger on the computer. She sadly replied that she had. The protagonist came to the big building of Kaiwan University in the afternoon. The boy looked around him and was surprised that there were so many people in Kaiwan. Chen thought it was a good thing that he went to another university when two girls came up to him. One student said that he noticed that Kaiwan is a real paradise on Earth. The girl asked the guy why he wasn't wearing a down jacket and if he was cold. Chen said that he had washed his down jacket yesterday and it had not had time to dry. The girlfriend replied that a down jacket should not be washed often or it would no longer keep warm. The boyfriend replied that it was dinner time and he had to leave. The protagonist kept thinking to himself that he couldn't let the girls meet. At this time, the instructor gathered the students at the university near room number FEF. The teacher said that the university had approved Chen Hansheng's idea, and the guy asked everyone to be led to this office. The student said grudgingly that the protagonist used them as helpers by duck baiting. The protagonist at this time was sitting in a cafe and appetizingly gorging himself on roasted duck. The girl told the guy reproachfully that he had promised to teach them how to eat duck, and ended up eating almost all of it himself. The protagonist heard someone calling him from outside. He turned around. A young, beautiful, and tall woman approached Chung. She was happy to see him. The woman asked the guy if his classmates were sitting around him. The guy noticed his girlfriend, Xiao Rongye, looking on with disapproval as the woman put her hand on him. The protagonist replied to the woman that he had friends from high school sitting around him. The woman was surprised and thought about the words she had just heard. The woman then turned around and told the protagonist that his classmates were prettier than her. Chen explained to his friends that his classmate came up and they have a good relationship in the group. Then the main character was approached by his friend and said he had something to discuss. The guy said that his roommate had recently broken up with a girl and was now looking for a new love. He added that this girl was very nice. Then a friend told the protagonist that if he did not have a girl's number, then a contact in Messenger would also do. Chen decided to give his friend the girl's Messenger contact. He also added that he should not text when he was at the university, but only when he was in the dormitory. The protagonist picked up his phone and found the girl's contact number in Messenger. The guy promised his friends cheerfully that he would take them to the lake after dinner. Suddenly his mom came up to the guy at the table and called out to him. The guy got really pissed off. He asked his mom what she wanted here. He didn't like her coming. The mother arrived at her son's house with his father and happily said that it was a surprise for him. Chen looked at his parents with dislike. The protagonist thought to himself he decided that today would obviously be a disaster. After a short pause, Chen squeezed out a smile and asked his parents if they had bought the tickets and come here. The mother was angry. She asked her son threateningly if he was going to push his mother away. The boy told his mother that there were a lot of classmates around and not to make a scandal now. Chen asked his father to stop the woman. The girl told the woman that her son only asked if they had bought return tickets, and the main character invites the parents to stay a while longer. The protagonist rushed to confirm the student's words. He offered his parents something to eat. The boy asked his mother if she would rest or go to the lake with them. The woman replied that she would go with them. The main character was angry. He was unhappy that his mother was going along with them. One of his friends noticed the guy's new cell phone and inquired about it. The mother asked her son where he got the money for a new phone. Chen replied that he had received the phone from the company. Then the guy, accompanied by his companions, walked over to the food stand. He told them all that it was time to move out. The protagonist, surrounded by friends and parents, walked up to a bridge outside of town. Chen thought to himself happily that he was finally safe. Suddenly, the guy saw his employer. He was afraid that he might tell on the entrepreneurial base. The principal turned to the side, saw the boy, and beckoned him over. Chen told his companions that they were all tired and it was time for them to rest. The father saw his agitated son and asked in wonder why he was leaving. The guy called the principal's secretary Yu and told him nonchalantly that he was just here walking with his family and showing them around the university. At this time, Secretary Yu asked the guy if he would show him the business base. The mother of the protagonist was surprised to hear such words. The guy was very scared and angry. His worst fears came true. At this time, the woman, along with the girl, were standing outside room number F. At the same time, two girls were cleaning the room. They were scrubbing the floors. The girl suggested to her friend Yuichu to rest a bit, and she replied that she wasn't tired yet. At this time, the main character was standing near the entrance to the room, and he told my mom that it was not yet necessary to go in because everything inside was not finished. The mother told the guy they would help him. The boy said they might get dirty and suggested going to the lake. The Xiao Zhongye girl said cheerfully to the guy that it was absolutely not scary. The mother looked at the protagonist with great suspicion and silence. The woman asked the guy if he was hiding anything. Chen said he wasn't hiding anything. After that, the mother said it was okay. She headed resolutely for the door. The woman went to the door and opened it with determination, intending to find out what was inside. The protagonist's mother was very surprised when she opened the door and saw the girl there. The cleaning girl was also very surprised to see a woman in front of her. The main character told the cleaning girl that he had brought his parents and classmates to visit. The girl looked at the main character's companions and decided it was too much. The guy asked the girl if they had finished cleaning up. He really wanted his girlfriend Yuichu to leave already. The girl replied that the cleaning was finished. The guys happily thanked her for her work. The cleaning lady was still holding the garbage bag in her hands. She was looking at the people standing next to her. Then the girl reported cheerfully that her roommate was still stocking up on cleaning supplies. The protagonist tragically realized that it was over. Yuichu's girlfriend was still here. To distract his companions, the guy offered them something to drink since it was already noon. He asked Xiao Rongye's girlfriend to buy some water. Xiao Rongye replied with surprise to the boy that she had water. The mother noticed that the boy was up to something. Surrounding people started asking the main character for different drinks. Someone wanted milk or orange juice. Chen gave his friend some money and told him to go with Xiao Rongye's girlfriend and buy them all a drink. The protagonist and his companion walked into the office and everything was shining clean. His mother said it was very nice. The guy was relieved that Yuichu's girlfriend wasn't here. He figured she had taken the cleaning supplies and left. At that time, the protagonist's friend returned with his girlfriend Xiao Rongye. They brought some shopping with them. Xiao Rongye consumed the orange juice with gusto and looked carefully around. The girl noticed the flower. She asked the guy if the girl had given it to him. Chen remembered Shangyan's girlfriend. He said she wasn't the type to grow radishes. This kind of answer completely pleased Xiao's girlfriend. She replied to the guy that she was satisfied. The time passed very quickly on the city. The evening was coming on. The guy decided to send his friends and parents. The friends said goodbye to Sen and told him they had to go. The boy told them that he would take his parents. The guy was at his parents' hotel and told them to rest. He had to go to the university. As the protagonist walked out of the hotel room, his mother hesitated. The mother asked her husband whether Xiao Rongye's girlfriend considers the protagonist as just her friend. The man replied calmly so that the wife does not make up too much for herself. The guy and the girl are just classmates. The mother said that something was wrong, and their son was very nervous. The man replied that they would have another look tomorrow. For the next 2 days, Chen took his parents around the city, showing them the sights. Along with the parents, the main character's girlfriend, Xiao Rongye, was also there. The girl scrutinized the pictures the guy took, and she liked them. In one photo, the girl was pictured with the main character's parents against the backdrop of a bridge. The main character then took a picture of his parents with a girl in one of the restaurants. There was also a picture of the main character's parents standing near the dock with a ship in the background. Very quickly the day passed and evening came. The guy and girl decided to go out. The Xiao girl along with the protagonist said goodbye to his parents. The man and woman wished them a happy journey. The parents looked after the main character for a long time as he left them with his girlfriend. The wife suggested to her husband that they visit their son again later at the university. He agreed. A man and a woman were walking through town. They passed one building with a sign. The main character's parents are interested in the fact that his office light is on in the evening. The woman said Chen couldn't go to work again. She couldn't believe that a guy could have business so late. The woman walked quietly into the office. She noticed a girl rummaging under the desk. The woman realized it wasn't her son and said hello to the girl under the table. The girl was very much frightened and agitated. She even banged her head on the table unexpectedly. After that, the cleaning lady turned around with a surprised look at the woman. The woman looked over and noticed that the cleaning girl was very pretty. The protagonist's mother suggested that the girl sit down. The cleaning lady said her hands were dirty. The woman cheerfully told the girl that she was trying for Chen Hansheng. The guy's mom asked the cleaning lady what her name was. The girl said her name was Shen Shen Yuchu. The woman looked at the girl affectionately and said it was a good name. The woman affectionately offered to help the girl wipe away her tears. Yuichu said it was dust on her face. The woman told the girl not to be afraid and wiped her tears on her face. Yuichu took a liking to the woman. She looked at her long and tenderly. Eventually, the protagonist's mother tells the girl that she doesn't have to clean anymore and she'll walk her out. Already outside, the Yuichu girl said goodbye to the woman joyfully and warmly. The protagonist's parents stared at the departing girl for a long time. Mom kept waving her hand at Yuichu. A woman told her husband that their son wanted to sit on 2 chairs at the same time, but the girl even came late at night to help him. The next day, the main character met up with his girlfriend Yuichu. The guy asked the girl if she had cleaned yesterday. Yuichu confirmed that she had cleaned. Girlfriend wanted to get something for her boyfriend. She went into her backpack. The girl pulled out of her backpack a pair of expensive good gloves. The guy looked at them, bewildered. Chung asked his girlfriend if she was giving him the gloves. Yuichu told the protagonist that his mother had given them to him. The guy was very excited about the girl meeting his mother but didn't understand why the parents came from the hotel to the university. The girl said that the woman's hands were frozen. Chen said he would pass the gloves. In the hotel room, Xiao's girlfriend was chatting with the protagonist's mother. The main character's girlfriend and his mother spoke and they had fun. They didn't get bored. The doors opened and a guy came into the room. He said he wasn't supposed to be here. The mother told her son that her hands were freezing as soon as she arrived. Xiao Rongye's girlfriend went to the store and bought her leather gloves. Chen told the cheerful woman that there was a store much closer. Xiao Rongye's girlfriend said she got a call from a counselor and had to leave. Her mother reminded her to be careful. As soon as the door closed behind the girlfriend, the main character decided to show his mother his present. The boy handed his mom the gloves and said that his girlfriend, Shen Yuchu, had tied them before her. The woman looked at 2 pairs of different gloves from 2 of the main character's girlfriends. Suddenly, the main character's mother got angry. She asked the evil one what he was doing. Chen replied that it's not that simple. After a couple days, the guy prepared gifts for the girls he knew. For Yuchu, he decided to give at least this paper shoe to keep her warm. For Xiao, he prepared pearl jewelry. The mother told her son that she and her husband were returning to Hong Kong the day after tomorrow. She added that accepting gloves from 2 different girls was not good. The protagonist was sitting with his girlfriend in his office, room number EF. The guy brought a huge pile of folders and documents and placed them in front of Yuichu. The girlfriend looked at the guy in surprise. She remained silent and filled out the paperwork. Chen smiled at the girl and asked if she didn't know how to record data. Yuichu was a little embarrassed and continued to fill out the documentation by hand. The protagonist thought it would be faster to record data using a computer. The guy decided to himself that the computer could be at Dong University. He decided to meet Xiao Rongye first. The girl was sitting at home at the time reading and her phone rang. The girlfriend reminded the guy that they hadn't contacted each other in a couple days. Chen explained to her that he had been busy for a couple of days. The girl reminded the guy that she didn't have any friends here and he could visit her. The guy invited the girl to dinner and she was delighted. He also told her that he would give her a present. The protagonist met at the appointed time with his girlfriend near her house. The girl was very excited. She shyly told Chung that he didn't often give her gifts. The girlfriend looked into the bag with interest. She was surprised to see that there was nothing inside. The girl turned the bag over. The guy replied that the bag itself was a gift. The bag is made of biodegradable material. The girlfriend grudgingly told the guy that he could have looked up something more interesting for her. She reported that other guys give their girlfriends flowers candy, and the protagonist is only capable of a package. Then Chen wanted to touch the girl. She shouted at him not to even come near. A guy asked a girl to lend him her computer. She told him he'd have to beg her. Afterward, the protagonist along with his girlfriend came to the dining hall to have lunch. The protagonist looked around carefully at his fellow students. Chen noticed that the students were looking at him very disapprovingly. He decided to himself that if their eyes were bullets, he would have been dead long ago. The girlfriend noticed the guy's consternation. She asked the friend if he was scared. The student confirmed that he was scared. The girl consuming her lunch looked carefully at her interlocutor. He was silent. The girlfriend asked the guy why he didn't want to eat at his place. He told her that he'd even do it for her. He decided it wouldn't be a bad thing if he ate at Kawan. A student and her friend came up from the side, and to greet the protagonist, he turned around. The student turned out to be Shu's classmate. She introduced her friend named He Yu. He said hello to Xiao Rongye's girlfriend and told her that they had seen each other at the assembly hall. The protagonist wondered for some reason this approaching student caused him anxiety. The Xiao Rongye girl greeted her acquaintance timidly. She called him Senior He. Student. He Yu turned his attention to the main character. He was silently gazing at the guy. Afterward, he told the cheerful Xiao girl that she was absolutely no good at picking her boyfriends. The student didn't like it. Xiao angrily asked the guy what he was talking about. Student. He told the girl judiciously that she should be more conscious and not socialize with everyone. At this time, the student told his friend to stop. He still hadn't said hello to Chen. He said in a happy and calm voice that now it was okay to get acquainted. The protagonist sat silent. He answered nothing to the student's greeting. Unexpectedly, Chen stood up, bowed, and called his interlocutor Senior. The protagonist grabbed Student He's arm and pulled him towards him with all his might. The guy threw the student on the table with the food and yelled for him to try it. Student. He didn't even have time to defend himself after the fall. His glasses even fell off of him. The tray of food fell to the ground. The student couldn't keep his footing on the table. The people around them looked anxiously at the slumped student. They wondered if he was all right. For a while, student. He lay on the floor and couldn't even get to his feet. The protagonist shook off his hands as if nothing had happened, and he said that he simply shook hands with the person he was talking to. A very pissed-off student pulled himself up. He looked at the guy with anger. Chen looked at his opponent with a long and unpleasant gaze. Student. He was adjusting his glasses at this time. He was still glaring angrily at the protagonist. Girl Xiao looked at the guy and told him to wait. Without thinking long, student, he headed for the exit and shouted to his girlfriend that they were leaving. After lunch, the protagonist and his girlfriend were walking near the university. A guy was taking a walk with his girlfriend and he treated her to ice cream. The Xiao girl said that the food in the canteen was not very good, but luckily there was ice cream. Chen told her that it was very risky to eat with her. Suddenly, the girl from the side was called out by some friend of hers who came over. The girl excitedly told Xiao that she had heard about her today. It was as if Xiao was about to be attacked by some guy, but she was protected by a swarthy friend. Xiao told the protagonist that her girlfriend's name was Xiaoli. The girl looked at the guy carefully. Chen told a happily surprised Xiaoli that he was the swarthy guy. He told her his name. The guy asked Xiaoli if the student in the dining hall was Xu Zhengxi's boyfriend. Xiaoli explained that student He had previously rejected Xiao Rongye. For this reason, the student pretended to be Xu Zhengxi's boyfriend to take revenge on Xiao. The protagonist told cheerfully his girlfriend that he saved her life and asked if she wanted to repay the favor. Xiao got angry. After that, Xiao Rongye got to her feet and said that she would bring something to the guy. Chen was still sitting on the bench. He clarified with the girl what she would bring him. Xiao Rongye turned to her friend and said that she would bring him the computer he wanted to take. 64. A little while later, the girl brought and gave the guy a computer. He turned around with it and said goodbye. Afterwards, Xiao Rongye and her girlfriend Xiaoli stared after the departing guy for a long time. Suddenly, Xiao remembered that she had forgotten something. Xiaoli asked her friend what was wrong. The girl said that there was a text diary left on the desktop of the computer that needed to be moved. Xiaoli asked what kind of diary it was. Totally sad, Xiao Rongye replied that there was information about Cheng in the diary. Xiaoli said cheerfully to her girlfriend that she would once again remind her love for her boyfriend. The protagonist returned to the room where his student friends lived, relaxing and drinking beer. The guy walked into his friend's room and looked at them in surprise. The students looked surprised at the guy and didn't understand what had happened to him. The friends thought, why would Cheng lose his love again? They thought that Gao Jialiang and Jin Yangming might have contacted each other again. The student said that he had not fallen in love, but had once again been deceived by a girl. Then the guy got a message from a girl named Alien. She wrote that she wanted to communicate with him, and after communication, the guy realized that they have a lot in common. The student interrupted his story and thought sadly about his story. Chen asked his friend to tell him what happened next. The student couldn't help himself and called his girlfriend Alien in the evening. The guy stopped his story. He had a hard time telling what happened next. A frustrated student said that Alien happens to have a boyfriend. He was offended that girls flirt with guys when they are already dating someone else. The student said that he had already had his heart broken 3 times since the beginning of his studies. Chen told his friend to be more optimistic. The protagonist told his friend that he would find a girl who would be attentive and kind and generous and would not be led only by money. The student turned around and asked his friend where he should look for such a girl. The protagonist thought deeply about such a question. He didn't even know what to answer immediately. Chen replied judiciously to his friend that if he has to look for some girl, it means she doesn't need him. Suddenly, a girl broke into the room. She was excited and called out to the protagonist. The student told the guy to hurry up because there was a fight in their classroom. Chen asked if Zhu Chenglong was the instigator again. The girl reported that a few foreign guys beat up Shang Yanyan. The protagonist, along with the student, headed to classroom number 107. Inside the auditorium, some student was very rudely scolding a girl student. She kept quiet. A guy accused his girlfriend of falling in love with him. Now she's dating other people. The student grabbed the girl by her clothes and demanded that she say something to him. The surrounding students were very worried. They were waiting for the girl Hu Ling Yu, who had previously left to pick up the head teacher. At this time, the student rudely told her former friend that they broke up yesterday. The girl gathered her thoughts and wanted to make another accusation to the guy. The student responded unequivocally to the guy not to look for excuses and they don't owe each other anything. The student was very much angered by such words. He rushed at the girl and wanted to hit her. The angry guy's punch was about to reach the girl's face. She was frightened. The student squeezed her eyes shut and prepared for the guy to hit her. The girl wasn't hurt. Someone saved her by scattering her vicious opponents around. The protagonist made it in time. He got into the fight while defending the student. The battered student did not realize who had just attacked him in the auditorium. Chen said angrily to the student that he dared to come into their auditorium and cause a disturbance here. The main character looked at his classmates and asked why they didn't do anything when the fight started. The guy then turned around and looked at the student. She had a bruise on her face. The protagonist was angry, but did not give away his emotions. He turned to his friend Shichao. Student Shichao slammed the door shut. Chen decided to deal with the bullying students. The protagonist, along with his friends, said that they will punish the students and put them in the abyss of misery. Chen and his classmates gathered together and beat up the student bullies. At that time, a security guard knocked on the door and heard a fight inside. The protagonist told his friends to stop the fight since enough is enough for the bullies. After that, Chen calmly opened the door to the auditorium so that the guard could enter. The guard asked angrily why they had only opened the door now, even though the fight had been going on for a long time. The guy answered calmly that it was noisy inside, so they didn't hear the knock. Once inside the auditorium, the guard saw the beaten students on the floor. After examining the students, the guard ordered everyone involved in the fight to follow him. Chen told the guard that he needed to deal with the situation first. He replied angrily that the protagonist should follow him too. After that, Chen answered the guard on principle that he wouldn't go like the other students. The main character asked to be approached by the girl Shang Yanyan. The guy pointed at the girl and told the guard that foreign students had come to Kaiwan to beat up one of their female students. The guard didn't believe the guy right away. Chen replied that his words can be confirmed by 54 people. The proof is also the marks on Shang Yanyan's face. Surrounding students confirmed the main character's story that they were protecting the girl from foreign students. Chen pointed at the girl Shang Yanyan and told the guard that this student was part of his salary. She was beaten in an area that should be guarded. After thinking for a bit, the guard turned around and started to walk away from the auditorium. The guard left and radioed back that everything was fine and there were only a couple of hooligans. The security guard commanded the students to go to class. He took the 3 commuters with him. After a long conversation, the guard threatened the foreigners that next time they would seriously deal with them. The students promised that there would be no next time. The main character stood near the entrance to the university and took a cigarette out of the pack he decided to smoke. Chen thought to himself that the foreigners had come here to the university to beat up a man. Suddenly, a girl named Shang Yanyan came up to the guy and took the lighter from him and said she would help him. The Shan girl took the lighter in her hands and used it to light the guy's cigarette. Chen thanked her. Student Shang Yanyan looked at the guy and told him that she wanted to thank him. The protagonist replied judiciously to the girl that he would have done the same thing if he were a different person. Chen commanded the Shang Yanyan girl to go back and he would take care of the rest. Student Shan gave the departing protagonist a long and silent stare. After that, the girl hid the lighter she took from the guy in her pocket. The protagonist, along with his girlfriend Yuichu, was sitting in his office F. A guy walked up to a girl and caught her working. He asked her what she thought about the computer. Chen was surprised. He noticed that something was going wrong with the girl's strange behavior. Suddenly, his girlfriend turned around and ran out the door. The guy didn't realize what was wrong with her. Chen wondered why his familiar girl was running away and avoiding him. A guy decided to work on his computer. He saw that there was a lot of garbage on the desktop. Looking closely at the documents, Chen noticed something interesting. The guy saw that there was some text document with his name on the computer desktop. In the text document was a girl's diary for the date September 1st. She wrote how the protagonist had pissed her off again. The girl reported that on October 3rd, Chen brought her to tears in a bar, and she decided never to speak to him again. For a date in late November, the girl wrote in her diary that Chen was acting very distant. She thought he had another girl. The protagonist read the information about himself in the diary with great interest and rapture. The guy got angry because the girl wrote down all his blunders. She did not write down how he bought her clothes and took her out to eat. After reading the diary, the protagonist resolutely closed the laptop. Chen remembered that the computer was with the girl Shen Yuichu. She could also read the diary. The guy figured Yuichu wouldn't read someone else's notes, but she might have accidentally clicked on the document. The boy decided firmly to himself that he must ascertain whether the girl could have read the document. The main character thought to himself he couldn't understand why something was going wrong in his life all the time. To relax, the guy walked out of his office and had a cigarette. He was thinking about something of his own. Suddenly, a call on his cell phone distracted him from his thoughts. The guy picked up his phone and noticed that a female student, Shang Yanyan, was calling him. Chen suggested that the girl talk to him tomorrow. She replied that she wanted to talk to him today, and the guy agreed to meet her. The main character came to the place where Shang's girlfriend was waiting for him. She was sitting on a bench near the fence. The guy slowly approached the girl. She noticed him and was very excited. Shang Yanyan drank beer from cans and told the guy that she didn't expect him to come anymore. Chen sat down leisurely on the bench and said that as the headmaster, he could not distance himself from his students. The guy took out cigarettes and asked the student if she smoked. Shan replied that she had smoked in high school and had quit now. Then Shang Yanyan took out a lighter from her pocket, which belonged to the main character. He was surprised. The guy told the girl surprised that she had his lighter. Chen thought to himself that if his girlfriend Xiaorongye found out that he was sitting here now with girlfriend Shang, she would definitely be angry with him. The protagonist continued to sit with the girl and drink beer around a lot of empty cans. Student Shang Yanyan sat and silently looked at the guy. He kept drinking. The girl was thinking about what to say to the guy. There was a long and awkward pause between them. Chen asked the girl if her face hurt after being hit. Shang replied that thanks to her boyfriend, she wasn't hurt too badly. The protagonist replied confidently that he would do that to anyone in danger. Suddenly, the student laughed softly. This interested and surprised the guy. Shang told the protagonist that if he switched to Shen Yuchu, it would be a bit of an offense. The guy in response remained silent. The student said calmly that it was just a joke. Shan Yanyan told the guy that she admires the way he protects his girlfriend. The student said that the guy who hit her earlier was her first love, and she and he were together in their first school year. Shan's parents were in business. In middle school, she didn't have much money, but she wanted to have a phone to show off. The guy saved up some money and surprised his girlfriend by giving her a cell phone for New Year's Eve. In gratitude, Shan Yanyan spent the night with this guy. He was her first man. The student asked the guy if he would say anything about her story. Chen replied thoughtfully that the girl and the guy had real feelings earlier, but then something happened. In high school, Shan Yanyan and her boyfriend went to different schools. She first thought their love was unshakable. In high school, a high school student kept declaring his love to her, but she never accepted him. Then one summer day, Shan decided to visit her young man and came to his school. The girl happened to notice that her boyfriend was standing with another girlfriend. The student was silent. She continued to drink her beer. Chen thought about the story he had just heard. The protagonist sat silently on the bench next to Shang Yanyan. They were silent for a long time. The student then said that she and her boyfriend both went on a binge and cheated on each other. That's what led to her getting. Shan asked the guy if he really thought she was trashy. The protagonist replied that it was normal. The guy drank beer and was silent. The girl looked at him piercingly and questioningly for a long time. Shan said that she then wanted to study quietly and not give anyone a chance to make love to her. But then she met the main character. The sitting student wanted to lean on the guy. He at this time quickly got up and left. Leaving, Chen said to the girl that although he is also a scumbag, he is not suitable for her. The student looked disappointedly in the guy's wake. She didn't like that he left. Suddenly, Shan asked the protagonist to betray her. Chen thought it was the first time he had heard such a strange request. The student stood up and shouted to the guy that he would always belong to Shan Yuchu. She promised never to come between them. Shan asked the guy to spend some time with her. The guy kept walking and told the girl not to get cocky since he didn't have time for her. The girl yelled to the guy that she felt good with him so she would try again. Chen replied to the student that she could be free. It was already quite late in the evening when the protagonist was returning to his home. Near the house, Chen noticed his girlfriend Yuichi waiting for him. The girl stood looking at the guy in her hands with a very frightened look. She was holding a white rag. Chen asked the girl why she was here. He rubbed her cheek. Yuichi silently handed the boy a white cloth. It turned out that she was the one who had tied the boy's clothes. The protagonist got very emotional. He asked the girl if she had tied him up. The guy was very amazed that the girl had knitted something for him. Yuichi said timidly that she just didn't want to distract him. The protagonist told the girl happily that she had managed to surprise him. The girlfriend became very self-conscious. She clutched the tied-up clothes for the guy. Chen told the girl calmly and sympathetically that he would wear what she had tied up for him. The guy wore a scarf given by the girl and said he'd walk her out since it was getting late. The main character was standing outside the university building. He remembered that lately he had been encouraging girls to go jogging. For this reason, he had a lot of time on his hands. Chung thought the banner could be displayed at the dedication. It would help attract attention. The guy noticed the girl on stage adjusting the lights in the auditorium. The guy asked the girl if the students were here. She said that she was adjusting the equipment but didn't think there would be any problems. The main character approached the girl and said he was about to help her. He asked the girl why she was so late, if she wasn't afraid of ghosts. The student smiled and said that ghosts have no place here. The main character smiled at the girl and said he meant the hungry ghost. The student didn't understand what the guy meant. She looked at him questioningly. The girl asked the guy what specialty he was from. Chen hesitated to answer. The protagonist remained silent. He didn't want to tell this girl anything yet. The student said his name is Li Zhuonan. He is studying in the second group of public administration. The guy told the girl that they had the lights set up and now it was time to mess around with the microphone. Chen asked the students who had just approached where the banners hang here. The student said one banner is hanging at the activity center and another near the stadium. The guy asked the protagonist if the banner should be hung. A student asked Chen to open his banner and he will see if it can be posted. The main character did not react in any way to the student's request. He passed by. The guy informed the students that there are problems with the main character banner and they can't be posted. The protagonist unfurled his banner and asked students what they didn't like. The sign congratulated them on the successful start of the freshman initiation. The student replied with surprise that there was nothing there. The guy said excitedly that everything has the same content. Chen said he found a sponsor who gave him 1,000 yuan. The students replied that it didn't meet the criteria of the other banners. The student told the guy named Zhou Xiao that there were no rules. Then Zhou Xiao shouted to the protagonist that room number 101 was him. The student accused the protagonist of deciding to use the resources of the student union to get ahead. The guy with the glasses said that the protagonist in that case wouldn't be suitable for a place in the student union as a deputy. The student Zhou Xiao told the guy that the head chairman of the student government had returned. The guy yelled that it would be a good idea to swing away from the protagonist now. The next day, the protagonist came to see his employer, Secretary Yu. Chen told Secretary Yu that he had come to help him with the paperwork. The secretary asked if the guy wanted a member of the youth committee to help him. The guy said that Secretary Yu had to approve everything first. The man held the packages in his hands and said he didn't know anything about them. The secretary asked the boy if there were any difficulties. Chen said he wanted to apply to the youth committee. The secretary said that teacher Guan Shuman was in charge. The boy said he should go and greet her. After that, the secretary along with the protagonist went to the right office. The secretary knocked on the door and asked teacher Guan if she was free. The teacher walked over and slowly opened the door. She was vacant. The main character was very much surprised he recognized in the teacher a familiar girl. The boy looked closely at the teacher and realized that earlier it was her. Teacher Guan asked the secretary why he had come here with Li Juanan. The secretary didn't understand what the girl was asking him. The teacher asked the secretary who the guy standing next to him was. The protagonist said his name was Chen, and he was the headmaster of the second group. The teacher thought about it. The boy explained to her that she was setting up the equipment at the activity center that night, so he decided to help her. The girl recalled that he introduced himself to her as Li Jianan. The protagonist said as if nothing had happened that he called himself Chen Hansheng. Secretary Yu came up with the explanation that teacher Guan was constantly meeting different people, and therefore might have gotten her names confused. The girl invited the guy and the man into the office and asked the secretary why he had come. The secretary said that he wanted to recommend the protagonist to the youth committee because he was very capable and hard-working. The girl suggested going to the observation center. Chen said that he would work with Secretary Yu and teacher Guan for now. The secretary said cheerfully for the teacher to deal with the protagonist for now, and he had to go. The guy told the teacher that if she didn't have anything important for him, he'd leave. The teacher said that the protagonist, after joining the youth committee, should familiarize himself with the documents. The girl handed the guy a huge pile of folders and documents and told him to finish them before she came back. Late at night, the protagonist sat and scrutinized the documents. Suddenly, the guy came across an interesting file and he noticed it. The protagonist pulled a curious document out of a folder and began to study it. Chen happily looked at the document and contentedly thought to himself that this was a good coincidence. After that, the protagonist decided to check out his office and see how things were going there. In the office, he saw his student acquaintance Shan Yang. She explained to the guy that she was coming here and working part-time. The protagonist replied judiciously to the girl that she didn't need the money. The student replied cheerfully to the guy that she lacked love. Chung said she could hardly last long. A girl came into the office. She asked Shang unhappily why he was here. The student replied that she had the right to come too. The girl who passed by looked at the Shang Yang student with great dislike. The guy was going through the documentation at the time. Shan said that if everyone started wearing uniforms, they would become more famous. The protagonist replies to her that it's a good offer, but there's no money. The student said that her family owns a garment factory, so she can make the uniforms for free. She just wants to be able to come to the office and return. The main character said he's hiring Shang Yanyan. He made her in charge of uniforms. Suddenly, some female student ran into the office. She excitedly called out to head teacher Chen. The student reported that the union holds a plenary session at noon and all members must attend. A guy asked if he could skip the meeting. The girl replied that the topic was internal affairs, so everyone should participate. Chen said they were going. The main character came to the auditorium where the meeting was scheduled. There were a lot of people there. The boy wanted to take his seat, but suddenly someone called out to him from outside. The girl told the guy that he could only get the right to take time off after her consent. Chen asked why that was so. The girl was very excited. She looked carefully around. After that, the girl quietly told the guy that Zuo Xiaoli and Zhou Xiao wanted to throw him out of here. The girl told the boy that teacher Guan had been informed that he was not suitable for the position. Zuo Xiaoli decided that the usual dismissal was not enough, and so he decided to humiliate Chen in front of everyone. The enemies of the protagonist want him to refuse the position himself. For this reason, they want to dishonor him today. After a long pause, the guy said without any emotion that he wasn't going. The girl was very surprised and frightened at the same moment the protagonist was called by a student. The guy told the protagonist that if he was afraid, he could leave the meeting. At this time, the host of the meeting was watching the protagonist from afar. The host ordered everyone to close the door so they just start. The guy behind the lectern said he wanted to bring up an important topic at today's meeting. The presenter said that there are arrogant people in their union abusing authority. The presenter then said that after much discussion, a decision had been made. The host announced that the protagonist was being expelled from the public relations union. The students near the pulpit felt happy about Chen being expelled. The protagonist decided not to give up so easily. He stood up and addressed the vice chairman. Chen said that he himself is not resigning, and he can't be expelled because of such reasons. The guy speaking said it was a decision of the youth committee. Someone suggested that no proof was required. After that, the guy looked at the main character and decided that he was definitely done for. The chairman asked the guy if he would leave voluntarily or if he needed proof. Chen said he was innocent and demanded proof. The student behind the chair told Zhao Xiao's boyfriend to go and bring the evidence. A guy came in and brought with him a document he had left standing in the doorway. The student asked that Chairman Xiaoli come out of the office to him. The chairman asked Zhou Xiao to present the document to him. The guy told him to come over himself. After that, Xiaoli walked down from the pulpit and approached the guy standing near the door. The chairman impatiently snatched the sheet from the lad's hands and began to read. The chairman took the document and began to read it. The document described a lot about the main character and gave additional instructions at the end. Xiaoli was unpleasantly startled. He didn't expect there to be any additions to the document. Secretary Yu was telling Teacher Guan that just recently, because of the 50th anniversary celebration, there was a competition and debate. After that, the secretary pointed to the protagonist and said that he had become a great assistant. Teacher Guan agreed with Secretary Yu's words. She looked at the boy carefully. After that, the teacher gave the protagonist reports in the form of charts. Chen thanked her for giving him the opportunity to learn more about the union. The protagonist sat down and began to study a large stack of documents in detail. The boy found among a large stack of tables a document that concerned him personally. The higher authorities did not accept the proposal to exclude the protagonist. The same document was now being shown to Xiaoli by the protagonist. He couldn't believe that such a thing was possible. Cheng was still holding the document in his hands. He realized that the chairman didn't expect that he had already had time to deal with everything. The protagonist went to the window where his girlfriend Xiao Rongye was sitting and started banging on it. The girl looked at her friend. She was silent and didn't answer him anything. Chen shouted excitedly to his girlfriend to go with him to see the snowman. The girl asked the boy in surprise if he had skipped class to show her the snowman. The protagonist showed the girl a standing snowman. Xiao Rongye stood by the window and remembered her encounter with the protagonist. The girl looked out the window and wondered what Chen could be doing right now. At this time, the main character's phone rang. It was his girlfriend. Xiao Rongye asked the guy what he was doing on the last day. It wasn't very cold. The guy told her that it might snow. The guy said that some students ran out to see the snow. A girl told me that it was the same way. Someone shouted that it was snowing and everyone ran out, but it turned out to be raining. The girl remembered how once a guy had skipped half a class to make and show her a snowman. Then Chen replied to the girl nostalgically that he was very stupid. Zhao told the guy that she remembered for the rest of her life how he pulled her by the hand to show her the snowman. The girl asked the guy to come over to her place. She wanted to see the snowman with him. Chen replied that he had another appointment today. Zhao turned off her phone. She felt sad and lonely. The girl stood all alone at the window. She didn't feel like calling anyone anymore. At this time in the restaurant, people were celebrating commercial success. With them was also the protagonist. One man asked Jun what he thought of his words from last time. Jun said that director and assistant Kun are completely different people. Although the branch has taken over the task, because of the lack of staff, it is necessary to go shopping by themselves. The man said it didn't matter since the electronics recycling plant was in Gangnaung. Jun said he needed to think and suggested a drink. The protagonist was interested in an electronics recycling plant owned by Hong Kong. Guy asked Director Zhang which factory Director Liu had just mentioned. Jun said it's a subsidiary of a well-known consortium in Hong Kong. They used to want to entrust the delivery to Shetun. Jun told the guy that Hong Kong has a steady rise in disease. Because of that, none of their couriers want to go there. At that time, the woman sitting at the table shouted that it was snowing outside the window. The woman looked joyfully delighted and childlike at the snowfall outside the window. The rest of the meeting also got up from the table and walked over to the window. The woman said she came from Guangdong and she hadn't seen snow in a very long time. The woman added that it was also important to have someone to look at the snowy landscape with. The man called her Mrs. Kun and thanked her for her wonderful words. After the holiday dinner, the guy was walking down the street. He was by himself with snow crunching under his feet. The guy went to the house where the girl he knew lived and stood there for a very long time. After a long pause, Chen said to himself that he was a very big loser. At the same time, the phone rang for the girl lying down. She had already gone to bed. The girlfriend told the guy in a sleepy voice that it was very late and she was asleep. Chen, standing outside, told the girl that he was giving her 3 minutes to get out. Barely dressed, the girl jumped outside. She was happy to see the main character. Chen told the girl to look at the snowmen he had made. The girl looked at the snowmen carefully. One of them, the guy, even put a cigarette in his mouth. The Zhao girl was amazed that the guy still came to see her today. The girlfriend told the guy admiringly that the snowmen were very beautiful. Chen replied that he had been busy most of the day. That being said, the main character decided to take the time to see his girlfriend. The guy told Xiao that he wanted to join her in seeing this beauty. The girl ran up to him happily. The protagonist was very much pleased by the girl's reaction to his visit. Xiao hugged the guy and said that she thought the main character didn't like this kind of thing anymore. Chen replied to his girlfriend that he couldn't forget about her. He thought to himself that he and the girl had the same mind. The girl was still hugging the guy. He told her excitedly that it was very slippery. The guy, along with the girl, plopped down on the snow. She was really laying on it. Chen told his girlfriend that she may have broken his back. Xiao told him that even if she did, it was no big deal. The main character told the girl convincingly to get up off him. Xiao asked the guy to take a picture of her next to the snowman. The guy told the girl cheerfully that it was a stupid suggestion and added to come back. What alpha guys dread the most is the arrival of various holidays. For a guy like this, it always remains unknown who he will spend the holidays with. The protagonist thought to himself that Xiao Rongye's girlfriend would definitely call him to eat. Shen Yuchu's girlfriend is not very observant. She might even ignore the celebration. The protagonist, immersed in his thoughts, was walking down the street around, felt the atmosphere of the holiday. Chen was on the phone with his girlfriend and she told him that he made her cry that night. The girl informed the guy that last week she had agreed with Gu's classmate to eat together. But then she refused again. Chen told the girl that it was Christmas Eve. He invited her to eat together. The main character walked into the office. He decided to see how his girlfriend was working there. The guy looked at the girl. She was fully engaged in studying the documents. Chen thought that girlfriend was very excited. She shouldn't be celebrating Christmas after all. The day passed and evening came. The girl from the office started packing to leave. The protagonist was watching the girl carefully. She was silent for some reason all the time. Chen looked at his girlfriend and asked her shrewdly what was wrong with her. The worker for some reason became very embarrassed and even blushed. The girl asked the guy if they could eat together today. Chen thought to himself that this was the first time a girl took the initiative to invite him. At the same moment, the main character got a message on his phone. He got distracted. In Messenger, the interlocutor asked Chen where they would eat. The girl shyly told the guy that if he was busy, it was absolutely no big deal. After that, the girlfriend started going through her bag. She wanted to give something to the guy. The girl shyly handed the guy a huge apple and said it was for him. Chen was very surprised by such a gift. He didn't expect such a thing from his girlfriend. The main character asked the girl if it was a Christmas present for him. She confirmed it. The girl was still holding the apple in her hands when her phone rang. The guy relaxed and exhaled quietly. He decided to take a walk somewhere with the girl. Chen suggested that the girlfriend go for a walk and asked her what she wanted to eat. The girlfriend replied that she wanted to go to the hot pot. Pretty soon, the protagonist and his girlfriend arrived at the establishment to have dinner. The girl told the guy that she could pay since he had already given her a paycheck. Chen told her no problem. At this time, the guy's phone message is good. He thought Xiao Rongye was very dangerous. The girl texted the guy that she was ready and asked where he was. She asked why he didn't show up and if he had run away. A guy texted his girlfriend to wait for him at the dorm. Then Xiao Rongye received a message from the guy where he indicated that he was busy. The girlfriend texted the guy to make sure he didn't lie to her again. The girl brought the food and asked the guy what he was looking at. Chen explained that it was all work-related. The boy sat and devoured the food. He thought to himself that he would have to eat again later. Chen told his girlfriend not to be in too much of a hurry to consume the food. He thought to himself that it was almost 8:30, and Xiao Rongye would be very angry. After dinner, the protagonist said goodbye to his acquaintance and she left. Chen recklessly rushed to run towards Yao. He thought that he still had his 4 more minutes. The girlfriend was fully dressed and ready to meet the guy she was waiting for. Chen ran up to the girl and told her in a joyful voice that he had come. The guy explained to his girlfriend that he was busy talking about himself. He felt that he even felt nauseous while he was running. Xiao looked at the guy and realized that it looked like he was really exhausted. Suddenly, Xiao Rongye noticed that the main character was holding an apple in his hand. The girlfriend asked out of interest if he was the one who brought it to her. The protagonist confirmed it. Xiao told the guy that he remembered that it's customary to give apples on Christmas Eve. After a brief pause, the guy asked his girlfriend what she wanted for dinner. After thinking for a bit, Xiao Rongye suggested that the guy go and eat at the hot pot. The girl asked the boy in surprise if he didn't want to eat. Chen explained that he had been running a lot, so he was feeling nauseous. A guy came with a girl to a restaurant and realized he didn't want to eat anymore. Here the girl held out a beautiful pink bag with a gift to the guy. Xiao told her friend that at first she didn't want to give him the gift, but then she changed her mind and wished the guy a Merry Christmas. Later that evening, the protagonist came running to the house of his working girl. Chen looked at the gift bag and thought it was pink for some reason. A girl came out of the house and asked the protagonist why he was looking for her. The guy handed his girlfriend a pink bag and said it was her Christmas present. The girl thanked the guy. He told her cheerfully that she should like the gift. After all the meetings, the main character decided to visit his friends in the dormitory. He decided that it was finally over. When the guy walked into the room, the students invited him to a festive table with hot pot food. The protagonist was cursing Christmas and the hot pot to himself.